on April. I'll do that again. I'm calling this meeting to order at 7:30 on April 20th. We're gonna start with the weather. Keith,
Okay.
please.
All right. I don't think anybody's complaining about the weather that we're having right now. As a matter of fact, tomorrow we may hit 90 degrees. We're gonna be close. The record's 89. That goes back to 1976, and we may tie or break that tomorrow. And then watch out for some, and we need the rain very badly. Watch out for some heavy storms coming through here on Saturday afternoon, between about 3 and 6 in the afternoon, and then showers overnight Saturday night, but that's going to give way to a really nice, much cooler and breezy Sunday. But we're not going to warm back up again for the rest of the month. It's going to stay below normal for the rest of the month. More typical weather of April rather than what we've been having, the June type weather. Real quickly, so far, the first several months of this year, of this calendar year, are the warmest and driest on record. And those records go all the way back to the 19th century to 1871. And it looks like, because we talked about this, I've been, mentioning this in my weather talks here, that I expected a very dry spring going into this summer, probably drier than we've had, the driest in this century, in the 21st century. So that's it. Now, another thing, if anybody ever has any questions during this session that we got the comments at the beginning and at the end, I'd like to answer those questions. If you've ever had any questions you want to ask the weatherman but might have been afraid to ask, don't be afraid to ask them. Because
Fear not.
I'm here for you.
Keith does not bite.
I have one. Have you ever used one of those divining rods to find water?
I have.
You have.
Well, my grandfather taught
There
me.
you go.
My grandfather says, all the wells in our area he found.
Now,
It turns out wherever you dig in that area, you'll hit water.
Right.
now that's something we should put on the listserv. I would sign up for
Yeah.
that. I really would.
And he taught me how to do it.
Well, that sounds like our village here. Anywhere you dig, you probably will hit water eventually.
Yeah.
Okay, the building administrator's report is Doug on and unmuted.
Good evening. At 3506 Bradley Lane, they requested an extension on the building permit, and that was granted. It will expire on May 31st. At 3417 and 3419 Cummings Lane, the resident information meeting was held on Tuesday, March 14th, and we're waiting for the county to approve the plans on that project. At 120 Quincy Street, they requested an extension of their building permit, and that was granted. It will expire on June 30th. At 155 Quincy, they have a building permit to install a deck on the rear of their house. We issued the permit on March 8th, and that work is underway. At 3502 Taylor Street, the owner has submitted an application to add an addition at the rear of the house. We've reviewed the plans and provided them with comments. About a week or so ago, they had a dumpster in the driveway, which the village had not issued a dumpster permit yet. So the homeowner was notified. They've removed it. And at 3415 Taylor Street, they've applied for a building permit to construct a shed at the rear of the property. We reviewed the plans, give them comments, and we're waiting for their response. And that concludes my report.
Thanks, Doug. Any questions? Okay. Now we are gonna approve a previous meeting minutes. I believe everyone has reviewed them. Do we want a motion? Do you have any questions?
I would like to make a motion to amend.
Amend.
Because I didn't see them until past the deadline. Thank you, Michael, for figuring that out. There was it was actually the penultimate substantive paragraph before you get to adjournment. It should read, Marty Langland asked the council how to respond to Susan's comment that due to transgressions by the 2020 election committee chair, all candidates were told that the election could have been contested.
Mhm.
That was the statement that was made in the meeting. That's accurate. It should go in there. And I'm not sure what, the next paragraph actually adds. So I would strike the one,
Which one?
because, and just in keeping with our longtime policy of trying to keep minutes civil, we don't just inject, resident opinions, that aren't substantive, that are, consistent with bullying, for example. So, it's the last paragraph before adjournment is the one that I would strike. Is the one that I edited, but unfortunately got it too late as I was tending to other village related and somewhat.
Okay, I mean, is there, I think it might require just listening to the audio again for everyone, just to
That's
Just
something with me.
confirm what.
The more they hear it, the better.
Yeah.
So sure.
Okay,
Go ahead.
so why don't we do that? I mean, we can just, I guess we can just postpone this. And have everyone review, and if you want to submit your edits,
Sure.
so we can review and then compare and contrast, we can do that. And then as to your comments about that resident opinions have in the past not been reflected in the minutes, is that what you're saying? Sorry.
We have not allowed comments that are abusive or uncivil or harassing.
So are you referring to Marty Langland thanked everyone for their hard work?
No, that was
Paragraph?
fine. That's fine. Yeah, it's the next paragraph.
Okay, so I don't know. Okay, sorry. Hold on a second.
It's the bottom of page 7.
Pardon?
It's in the folder.
In
right?
7, yeah, no, I'm looking at the next paragraph starts with Naomi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what Susan meant by saying that those are express support. So.
Is there a specific sentence you want to read to us that you found offensive?
Well, I think that certainly the last sentence, which I don't have right
That's
here.
I'd appreciate it.
It's the bottom of page 7.
Well, there was something about sly comments, like that's not the kind of thing that belongs in high level minutes. I think Michael, with his professional experience, will recognize that's really not what we're supposed to be doing with our minutes.
I think that if what we could do is go back and just do the quote, if that's possible. I think Naomi had a point that she felt was very important, and I appreciated what she said in my defense, was that there was a comment said about voting record, and I
Right.
think that for
That's
her, she found statements that were made by fellow council members not to be appropriate. So I think that
Yeah,
seems reasonable to have.
It's fine. I think we don't need to make derogatory statements about council members like that was a sly comment. It wasn't meant to be a sly comment. If she interpreted it that way, I suppose that's her prerogative.
so we
But
can
I
just
don't
say
think-
types of comments stop. Hope these types of comments stop. We can take
Oh, that would
slide
be-
out.
That would be fantastic.
Okay, we
I
can,
think we'd all be happier. with that.
we can review all that.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll postpone. The
No, I tried
approval.
to do it when I was chair.
So, okay, so we're moving on. So, but before turning to resident comments, I wanted to raise exactly this matter. That's been on my mind since our last council meeting. Unfortunately, those attending witnessed the meeting devolving into an unpleasant scene. It's my opinion that no matter the issue, no matter who felt wrong, no matter who's in the right, we cannot let our monthly public forum turn into an open hostility between council members or council members and residents. So as chair, I was caught off guard, but will not, as a council member, stand by and let this continue. We must have a basic modicum of civility during these proceedings and show respect toward one another and our residents, no matter the history that might exist between us. We're all adults, and it's time for us to be courteous to one another. In this regard, I will ask the council to go into closed session tonight at the end of our open meeting to discuss this matter further. I apologize if any residents were impacted or offended during last month's council meeting. And with that, I'd be happy to hear from my colleagues before going to resident comments.
I would ask that in the future, when residents see fit to defame anyone, other residents, council members, anyone else, that the chair would perhaps interject and a warning that comments that are defamatory could be pursued, that the village certainly doesn't want that on its record. And that might go a long way toward having meetings devolve in the way that they did. Maybe just taking a stand would help, I think.
Well, I mean,
And honestly,
Yeah.
you know, we know that we haven't accomplished much this term because the meetings have gone on interminably, because we allow residents to say whatever they want in whatever tone they want. I think just getting a little of a grip on that
Well,
would be useful.
let me just say, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can have a once a month meeting that allows residents to speak and be engaged and not be mere observers of the proceedings, but they have every right to engage here. And I think we can get projects done regardless of a 2, 3, or 4 hour meeting here. It doesn't impact projects. And I think in terms of the tone and the calling out of individuals, it's a two-way street, and it wasn't pretty on either side, if I may say that.
Agreed, I agree, and I also agree that there were many deficiencies all around. So let's just leave it at that, and maybe move on.
Well,
Oh, please go
well,
first.
I was just gonna say, I mean, how do we handle it? I mean, we're saying council members feel attacked, but also residents who feel they've been attacked. I mean, there was a mention of documents, so it's, I'm just saying that that's the example here
Yeah.
that we're talking about. So I'm all for civility and the proper place to raise these issues, but that did occur at the meeting. I know it was a long night and emotions were high, but that would happen, and how do we factor that in?
And issues related to ethical questions, based on our ordinance are not to be discussed in public. They're supposed to be, pursued discreetly and, not in a public forum as such.
And
So-
I did not reach any confidentiality if you are making that accusation.
Not
or
making an
suggestion.
accusation,
Okay,
but you were
because I
pointing
didn't-
fingers at an individual.
That was legitimate based upon statements that were made. I was defamed and I was defending myself. So let's move on. We can talk about this in closed session.
But I think Jeff, you wanted to. add
Arthur,
something.
was there anything you wanted to add?
Well, yeah, just, there are specific reasons to go into closed session. And this meet
There's
Those-
probably another reason as well.
to discuss personnel issues.
Yes.
Okay, no, that's all.
Awesome, yeah, and I just wanted to say, Andrew, as chair, I want to thank you. I think you brought a very civil tone as chair, and I certainly agree about the gum chewing and walking, though I'm not always very good at that, but you certainly are exceptional at allowing as much discourse and discussion, and I think it's been welcomed by many. With that said, I'm glad that we're going into closed session, because I believe that there are things that need to be discussed on a personnel matter that affect both the council and the community. I'm just going to be honest and frank with you. Several actually mentioned, but I say this in all seriousness. All of us, when we were looking for homes in the area, right, we all had many choices. We know that. And part of the reasons of settling here was the first time I was looking on our street, I met people like Keith and Holly and the Beans and others, and it was just such a beautiful, welcoming community. And then we became the bus dads and all of that, and it's been marvelous. But I have to say, if I, as someone who is shopping around, caught whiff of that meeting, honestly, I would have turned to Michelle and said, we're going to Potomac. I mean, it really devolved into a point where I think we all have to reflect, and I'm glad that we're going to have this discussion in a closed session where it belongs. But it is a two-way street, and yes, tensions go high, but there were normative practices that went above and beyond, and I think that in a closed session, we can address it
Yeah.
so it doesn't happen. And one other point I just want to make, I think this council actually has had remarkable achievements. Yes, really. And I just want to again thank the chair and members of the council for all that they've done for us to get to where we are. And I think their record and our record speaks for itself. So with that said, I'm gonna
Yeah,
turn it over.
well, we inherited some history here, as the newcomers on the council, and I wish, folks could just move on and be civil.
Speaking of which, I just have to say, I look at Keith and I think of all the amazing events that we've had. And I mean, we've had quite a number of things that have brought us together than the other side, which has brought us apart. So again, kudos to all our community volunteers. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Opening up to resident comments. If you want to raise your hand electronically, or if you're on camera, wave at us. That's, I think, Larry. You want to go first and then Marty?
Yeah, thank you. So last meeting, at the beginning, I suggested that we take care of, instead of this hall monitor stuff that the agenda had been stolen on, I suggested we get back to the infrastructure and making the village safe. And I also indicated that, criticized that the whole council as a group hadn't done much about that. And I want to amend that. There is a member on the council who has done work about that. And I don't think it's recognized. And I think it's important. And that person is Katie Howard. When my place was flooded, and I repeatedly asked for something to be done about it, and even sent videos to the village office, Katie Howard was the only person that took an interest in that and tried to get something done about it. She had no other support about it, but she did that. Katie's the only one that I see when we have these meetings about work to be done in the neighborhood and stuff. She's the only council member that tends to show up to these type of things. And I fail to recognize that that's her time that she's losing, and she's willing to put it in and do it. I can think about the 4th of July, where our village manager didn't get tents or tables, and Katie was the one that went out on her own and got the tables and the tents we needed. And on a later date, around Halloween, used her own checkbook to pay for things the village had failed to pay for. So Katie, and when we had an emergency about a major gas leak where people had to, the fire department, police made people leave their houses, and they couldn't find out when it was safe to come back. Katie was the only one that was lobbying for and trying to get an emergency communication system established, and everyone ignored her. So I apologize to you, Katie, for being another person who was ignoring your efforts, and tell you I appreciate them very much. The final thing is, pardon me?
That was just some reverb. You go ahead.
Okay. The final thing I'd like to say is about this comment that just came up about what is being said. There are, now, first off, to make it perfectly clear, our present village manager is, in my experience, doing a tremendous job, an overwhelming amount of work and demands that he just can't possibly deal with all at once, and he's doing a great job of it. And I'm not suggesting, and I'm sure no one else is, that other things that come up during this and subsequent he must deal with immediately. I know they have to take their steps in priority. However, in the past, no one in this, many people in the council, when there's this time for villagers to speak, let the villagers send in-depth emails, long commentary, which I'm now learning, and all of us, this is news to the villagers, that it's the practice that those comments are not going to be contained in the minutes, which I find absolutely objectionable. That's a denial of freedom of speech, and in some people could see it as an act of the government covering their incompetence, because many of those people speaking are talking about things that they're very frustrated about, that no action's being taken. And so trying to decide that the villager comments shouldn't be in minutes is absurd. Why don't you tell that at the beginning of every meeting then to the villagers, that your comments, we'll listen to them, but they won't be in the meetings. And there's no other way for you to get others in the village aware of our failing to do what you're begging us to do. I find that's just totally objectionable. I do agree with you 100% that in doing any of these things, good manners are absolutely essential and can be required and demanded. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Larry. Response or, okay.
Oh, well, I will thank Larry for, I mean, no need to apologize, and I appreciate the recognition, and if I've ever had to use my money to float the village, I was reimbursed immediately. So, and a lot of that for the Halloween party was by Andrew, because he was the acting village manager at the time for what, 4 weeks? That how long?
6 weeks.
Before the illustrious Michael. So, but it's my pleasure, but I certainly appreciate the recognition, Larry. Thank you.
And as someone who floated the village some money for leaf bags to the tune of $4,000 or $5,000, I was reimbursed quickly as
Sure,
well. So
other council members, yeah, same,
appreciate
yeah,
I do recall floating money as well.
yeah,
As
it's
I was
okay.
assistant acting manager.
Kate, I do want to thank you because I do recall you recruiting me to be in the dunk booth.
Oh, yeah, it's for the 4th of
that-
July. I'd like to
That
start
was
this
that
tradition.
was a big hit. And of course, I think it was Keith's son. One throw, I didn't even get a chance to get my seating and he
Yeah.
dunked me and the water was pretty cold. So
Yeah.
I do remember that. One thing I do want to say on a serious note that, and I know that we need to move along, is the minutes piece. And I totally agree. I mean, I've even, quite frankly, because I've been reprimanded for trying to make edits to minutes, I've quite frankly haven't made much in a while. And it's always been a challenge, I think, balancing minutes take an awful lot of time, but yet no one's going to be happy. But I do agree with Larry. I think the idea of it's important to have resident comments, but I think it's something that we need to really, chat about with Michael. And because it's just to give an example, I mean, I work as we know with the State Department, and we've pretty much in a lot of cases, except for some high level meetings, we don't do minutes much anymore. What we do is we allow the audio and, and at most we may do some highlights. And I'm not trying to say that meets the requirements of our local sunshine laws, but I do think it's important to take into account this incredible amount of effort and to hear from Michael how we could work with him. And also, I mean, Larry, I think it's the idea of saying that in order to make it less burdensome, we cut out all resident comments isn't quite frankly the solution either. So we can just
Let me
sit
say
together
a word on the other side. The Maryland Municipal League always is telling the municipalities minutes are not a verbatim record of the meeting. It is a record of actions that are taken. And so, in fact, many municipalities these days don't even publish minutes. They say if they're recording it, or if it's a video, they say, there it is. If you want to see it, go listen to it, go watch it. And so there are these conflicting desires of what we want the record to show. And it's not an automatic that we go one way or the other, something to be decided.
And just for the record, you've never been reprimanded by this council.
that is true. That is true.
Just want to be clear. But I look, I agree there's redundancy here with the audio. And just because something has been done a certain way doesn't mean it should continue that way. But at the same time, we do have a lot of resident comments and these minutes could drag on for, 20, 30 pages if we do that. So there must be a best practice that we can follow and maybe.
We could say something like Larry Watson raised the question of minutes.
So, okay,
Very kindly and respectfully.
that's right, which he
As
was. Marty,
Thank you all, and appreciate you being here tonight. I want to take a minute here to just go through a quick list of issues here. One of which is about live questions at the forum. I had asked the election committee about that on Monday, and they apparently still haven't decided. They got back to me today with an email. But I would really encourage the election committee to allow live questions at the forum. That was traditionally done in VMA, and I think, Arthur, you said it's your favorite part of the forum, so I hope that we'll be able to do that again this year. Second, I had a question about permit and variance hearings. And Katie, I do appreciate also you being the one person who reliably shows up for those. But I would like to ask the council to consider publicizing those, village-wide, because right now, most of us don't know when those hearings are going on unless we happen to be a next-door neighbor. So that's just a communication issue of, why not let people down the street know? Because, they can be affected by water runoff when there's construction up the street. So it's not just, anyway, to just publicize those generally to the village. I think that's pretty easy to do. And I appreciate Michael very much. I echo Larry's comments on that. I wanted to suggest that the council consider letting Michael hire temporary help when he needs somebody, like a paralegal to handle documents or, whatever. That's the kind of flexibility we I think want to have to allow Michael not to be overwhelmed. He's carrying quite a load. And Michael, I appreciate it. I think you're managing it quite well. But I think that the village manager ought to be able to handle things efficiently and hire a temp for a week if there's a particular project. So I want the council to please consider doing that or authorizing Michael to do that. I think you don't need a council vote if it's less than $10,000. So, and I'm sure Michael would be very judicious about doing that. It just seems to me something that would be more efficient and helpful. On the agenda item coming up about the charter amendment, that's a thing about changing who can vote so that people who own property but aren't here at the moment can't vote anymore. And that would be a big change for Martin's additions. And I would like to ask or suggest maybe that the council table that because the Maryland legislative session has now closed and that amendment in the Ways and Means Committee did not make it out of committee. So it's kind of a moot item. I don't think you need to talk to that tonight. I do think, when you do come to talking about changing the charter, we'll need a public forum on that. And I know, Andrew, you've been really supportive about holding public forums so that residents can in fact chime in. Thank you for that. And there's another charter issue that we can do down the road about some of the permanent changes in the charter that were made under the governor's temporary waiver back a couple of years ago, which, we might want to look at too. But charter changes, I think, the one about who can vote is moot at this point. So maybe save yourself some time. And let's see, I think that was it. Oh, Arthur, I had a question for you and we can do this offline later. I wondered, I was trying to figure out how much money the village had in our Montgomery County local government accounts. There are two big bank accounts there, but you don't need to answer that now. Just if you would get back to me tomorrow on that. I had trouble figuring it out from the audit records. That's my list and thank you very much.
Thanks, Marty.
If I might just clarify, all council members attend variance hearings. We're expected to, and we do. If we're-
But that, I think they're referring to the construction.
Construction meeting,
Construction.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's right.
Another clarification on that is it's specified in the code who is invited to those meetings. It's directly adjacent neighbors. It's not a matter of just communication and who I invite. I following the code by the law, and the village can change the code if you all want to, but.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Joel. Hello.
Hello. So Jeff, I actually want to address you in particular in the comment you said earlier. Look, I'm not saying this because I'm running for council. I think everybody who's on this call has already made up their mind. This isn't a campaign statement. I have had a wonderful time touring the neighborhood these past couple of weeks, and I have found, this incredibly spirited, thoughtful community, but it's a deeply divided one, right? I am not the person to undivide us. I think if I get elected to the council at this point, based upon what I've heard the past couple of weeks, I'm pretty concerned about my capacity to get anything done. I think it's you, right? So, Jeff, I don't know if you get to do an opening statement. I see that George is here at the candidate forum. The candidate forum is the next time this community gathers. I understand a lot of people have stopped attending the meetings. This is all the last meeting aside. this is the next big opportunity for this council to help people move forward. So I think in the setup of the candidate forum, I think it's very important that we find how to address moving forward. And Andrew, I look to you in particular. I think that you have the particular capacity to help us move forward from here in whatever you say at the forum. It's not me. This isn't me. I'm telling you, I've had dozens of conversations about the controversies over the past couple of years, and I still don't really quite understand them. I think it's you, but can we focus on figuring out how to use the candidate forum as an opportunity to move forward from here and reset? And so I just leave you with that thought. And I think it's all of us. I think it's absolutely everybody. I think it's Jeff. Hopefully you get to make some statements at the beginning. I think it's, Andrew and Katie and whatever you say at the forum. And I think it's George and however you set up the forum, because again, if I get elected, I just don't think I'm going to get very much done. I think it's going to be really difficult.
Well,
Joe-
can I just say amen? And this is something that we've been trying to do, Joel, and I think you recognize rightfully so that it's been challenging because some of this is so entrenched and it's like a history that is difficult to overcome. But one step at a time. It's like baby steps. I think things have gotten a lot better, especially in council meetings and the atmospherics in council meetings, with few exceptions over the course of the last 22 months. But it's not easy when there's personal animosity and things that go back many years. We don't have a magic wand, but we're trying. So I appreciate your comments, and if the candidate forum is that opportunity, I know all the candidates and residents will want to take advantage of that. So thanks, Jeff. Sorry.
Yeah, we do have dunking boots. I feel that that should be an annual amenity, but
Yeah.
Joel, I do apologize. Now, I wasn't entirely sure. I am not up for re-election this year, so I won't be making a candidate statement there. However, I do love participating in the candidate forum. So if for some reason I get invited, I'm more than happy to. Yeah, so I wasn't sure, Joel, if you had I'm sorry, I wasn't sure in what tone you meant I should be making a statement.
Maybe.
No, I mean, I thought that you were the liaison to the elections committee. Maybe as the council member who's the liaison, you got to make some kind of a statement or opening. Somebody got to open the session.
Yeah, Joel, and I'm really grateful for that. And I'm looking at Arthur, and I think he said it best. Our role as liaison is to keep our mouths shut and get out of the way, pretty much. It's all it's the election committee that runs it. So George and his colleagues are gonna be in charge there. So With that said, God bless and Godspeed.
And I thank Joel for running.
yeah, no, I think it's great as a newer resident. And I hope your listening tour is going well. We're excited that you threw your hat in the ring. We can all use new viewpoints, fresh blood, and different perspectives. So I'm really excited that you're going.
And
One
I
thing that
don't
we
feel
can,
an
I'm sorry.
incumbent- I don't feel an incumbent advantage. I know a lot of people say, oh, incumbents have it. I'd like to see that advantage. I don't feel that way. Joel, you're keeping me on my toes and you bring a lot of issues to the table. So thank you for running.
One thing though to say on a very substantive note is, as I think Marty even mentioned, I mean, there's a process for submitting questions.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, Joel, you bring up, I think, a really important topic, and I do hope that there are questions that are submitted or perhaps at the forum that might address this. But again, so there are ways that perhaps the topic could come up.
Great. Thank you, Joel. Really appreciate it. All right, we're moving on to committee updates. Let's go in the order that it's bulleted out here. Community engagement.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to have a meeting on Monday at 7 p.m. here in the office, and we'd like to have as many residents attend either virtually or here in person to talk about the planning of the celebration on the sidewalk, which is going to be May 10th. We're excited about that. And then right after that, on May 21st, the Shepherd Street Block Party, which is something that hasn't been done in several years. And I know there's going to be a lot of people. There'll be a good attendance for that.
Is that only open to Shepherd Street residents?
Oh, no, that's.
Okay.
But it is not, just to be clear, it is not a village sponsored activity and not a CEC sponsored activity.
This is just
Because
driven by residents on
It is
Shepherd.
only residential.
And are we helping fund it or is it funded by Shepherd Street residents
It's not, actually, there's a policy.
that we can't fund?
We're not,
that
we can't
that we
fund it.
don't
Yeah,
fund.
okay.
It's like a potluck.
Yeah.
We may want to return to that policy at some point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I will maybe try and get my 16-and-a-half-year-old dog to do a big round so we come across whatever goodies they have. Okay,
Okay, and then we're gonna be lining up, we're gonna talk about, Paul and Phil and myself are gonna talk about, lining up vendors for the 4th of July Independence Day celebration, Sunday, July 2nd. And, we're gonna discuss movie night, even though that's in September. That's been well attended the last couple of years and, Katie can attest to that. She's always there and so helpful. And, so that's it from me. We're excited about what we're gonna be doing.
sign me up for the Magruder's run again. And finally.
Okay,
Quite the road trip.
and,
Recording in progress.
sorry. My time is up. I thank you for yours.
Thank you, Pete. Election committee, George, I see you on, and if you want to unmute yourself, please.
Thanks, Andrew. As has been mentioned a couple of times, we are in the fast and furious portion of the election period. Key dates coming up. We've got the candidate forum next Tuesday at 7:30. That is going to be virtual. So it's all going to be done via Zoom. The meeting info will be going out. As was mentioned in the initial announcement email, we will include it in the Friday roundup and we'll continue publicizing it. Anyone with questions they would like to submit for the candidate forum. Our preferred approach is for things to come into the committee email box, just that's the easiest central gathering location. But there's also a box that is available if you would like to submit an anonymous question that is available in the village office. Or you can reach out to committee members, et cetera, to submit your question. You do have the option in submitting a question if you would like us not to use your name during the forum. Absolutely fine. Just let us know. If you don't include it, we'll send a nice, helpful follow-up. So you do not have to use your name during the forum if you do not want to. As of today, I think, and Michael can correct me if I'm wrong, as of today, the current version of the voter roll went out to the vendor. They are starting to print the ballots, everything. Those will go out shortly after the forum next week. Keep in mind to update people, if you have someone who has moved into your house or has recently turned 18 in the last year and you are not sure if they're on the voter roll, reach out to the committee in the village office. If you have someone who has moved out or is no longer living there and you're concerned they're still on the voter roll, reach out to the committee in the village office. We'll get that updated. If your ballot, we'll send out a notification when the ballots are in the mail. If your ballot doesn't show up within a couple of days, reach out to the committee, let us know. We will make sure we get that updated. If your ballot is damaged or you are not going to be at your at the mailing address that is listed in the village directory or on our mailing on the voter roll during the election period, reach out to us, let us know. We will figure out a workaround on that. Ballot drop-off date is May 10th. It's going to the celebration on the sidewalk. We're very excited to see what that's going on, but we will have the table available with the big drop box like we did last year. If you want to bring down completed, signed, sealed in its envelope ballots, you can drop them off there. You can also request a new ballot at the table and we will get one sent over. Ballots need to be back to the vendor by 5 o'clock on the 23rd of May, I believe is the date. So once you get them in, we have lots of options for doing that. Just a reminder, you can bring them down during the drop-off event, but generally don't bring them down to the village office outside of that. That presents some safekeeping. Either drop them in the mail or bring them to the drop-off event. think that is everything. Michael, am I forgetting anything on the vendor updates and everything?
I
How's
think,
our mailbox doing here? Is it safe and sound? Can people use that again? Remember, we've had some issues with things.
are you talking
going.
about the USPS
Yeah,
mailbox in front of Brookville Market?
Yeah,
The assistant village manager has been in communication with the post office in the area, trying to get that maintained and updated and maybe repainted. It's been pretty bad shape.
yeah,
And she actually went out there and cleaned that bulletin board and that mailbox. So
okay. Ron, never good, George. Ron put his.
Yeah,
hand
that's not
up
good.
when You started talking.
Uh-oh.
No, it's fine. Yeah. It was probably clear enough as George said it, but I just wanted to piggyback on one point. If residents send emails to our election committee members, those emails are likely public records subject to inspection, and that would include candidate forum questions. The committee does not have to proactively announce someone's name at the committee. So, if you ask for anonymity, George can respect that, but if someone were later to submit a public information act request and ask for all those emails, they're probably subject to inspection. So if you want to guarantee an anonymous submission, use the box like George said in the village office.
I have Michael look away or Aaron.
That's right.
I won't keep any records of who walks in this door. How about that?
Great, that's helpful, Ron. Thank you. George, anything else?
I think that is it.
Okay.
We're looking forward to seeing everyone on Tuesday at 7:30 for the candidate forum.
And thanks
And
for.
again, the email box is open, so if anyone has questions they would like asked, please go ahead, send them over to us. We are putting together the question list, and the whole committee is working together on putting together the questions and prepping for our moderation duties. So if you have questions, please send them in.
Great, and thanks to you and the entire election committee and Michael and Aaron for all their help in organizing this. So we all look forward to it. Lori, ethics.
Michael.
Thanks, Michael. The Ethics Committee met last week to discuss the council's vote at the March 16th meeting to reject the one sentence VMA code amendment unanimously.
Can't hear.
So, maybe you want to come right up, you want to roll that thing right to this microphone?
I hear me fine when I went back and listened
Yeah.
to it, so.
Well, maybe Larry. Can't hear you, so.
Yeah, that works.
Okay, you're right here.
Okay, all right,
Thank you. Lori.
The Ethics Committee met last week to discuss the council's vote at its March 16th meeting to reject the one sentence VMA code amendment unanimously recommended by the committee to expand the definition of official to include all volunteers required to take the oath of office and complete a conflict of interest questionnaire. During that same council meeting, the council voted to adopt a resolution that reaffirmed the requirement that all members of committees take the oath of office and complete a conflict of interest form. I'm sorry, I did it at my back to you. I feel like I'm being rude here. These conflicting council votes maintain an inconsistency between the village ethics ordinance and the village ethics regulations. At the April 10th meeting of the Ethics Committee, we discussed the real-world effects of this inconsistency on the village's ability to monitor and enforce its ethics requirements. Just for everyone's information, the minutes from the April 10th Ethics Committee meeting have already been posted, thanks to Michael, and they're on the ethics page if you want to look them over. According to the village charter, section 4-201, the Ethics Committee is assigned responsibility for creating the village conflict of interest disclosure form. In 2019, and again with the 2023 adoption of the resolution, 2 unanimous councils voted to require that all village committee members file a conflict of interest disclosure form. The introductory paragraph of the village conflict of interest form, which again, all committee members must complete, identifies the responsibilities of the Ethics Committee as follows. The Village of Martins Addition is governed by a municipal charter that provides for a 5-member elected council to appoint an ethics committee. The committee shall provide advisory opinions to persons subject to the provisions of Chapter 4 of the Village Code as to its applicability and to make determinations as authorized by Chapter 4 of the Code. This questionnaire is required by the Village Charter, Section 903, and will assist the committee in doing its work. The Conflict of Interest questionnaire tracks with the Ethics Code, Chapter 4, which begins with, "This chapter establishes requirements to ensure the utmost ethical service by officials," and then defines impartiality and conflicts of interest. Currently, every reference to conflicts of interest in the charter, the code, and on the conflict of interest questionnaire is linked to the Ethics Committee. However, the council's vote against the amendment to define all committees as official committees other than the election, ethics, and tree supervisor are not covered now by the provisions of the Village Code, including those provisions that define conflicts of interest and impartiality, and those that provide a process for resolving questions and concerns of conflicts of interest and impartialities. In other words, the inconsistency between the regulation passed by the council at its last meeting and the Village Codes removes critical context from the oath of office and conflict of interest questionnaires required by members of committees other than the Ethics and Election Committee and Tree Supervisor. It's important to note that the Ethics Committee's recommendation to amend the code was made only after the committee sought input from the council at their September 22nd council meeting. Following the council's directive, with the majority of council members speaking in support of said amendment, and moreover, directing Ron to draft the amendment language, the committee discussed the amendment, which by that time had already been written by Ron, and then arrived at its unanimous recommendation. At the last meeting, the committee discussed the practical effects of the inconsistency between the code and the regulation, and compiled a list of 4 questions that it believes requires guidance from the council. First question: who will monitor the completion of the conflict of interest and oath of office form for members of committees not specified in the code? For example, not officials under the code. Note: the Ethics Committee responsibility in regard to this is limited to officials, which by the council decision not to amend the code excludes members of committees other than the Ethics, Election Committee, and Tree Supervisor. Question 2: who will enforce the ethical requirements for these non-official committee members? And what definition of terms such as impartiality and conflicts of interest will apply? Part A of 2. Who will provide advice and advisory opinions to these non-official committee members? Note: the code dictates that these opinions be provided to officials, which excludes members of committees not specified in the code. And I've already had an informal question from a committee member who is now not covered by the code about a potential conflict of interest. And I don't know if the question came to you, Andrew, but that's where I sent him. B: how will a resident file a complaint against one of those non-official committee members? And what rules apply to filing and resolution of such complaints? Note: the code specifies the rules regarding ethics complaints, including due process, confidentiality, and burden of proof requirements, but these only apply to officials, which does not include members of committees not specified in the code. 3: who will offer ethics training to members of committees not covered by the code, and what will that training consist of? Training had previously been limited to specific identified committee members that are explicitly subject to the ethics provisions in the code. This year, because everyone signed the form, everyone was invited to training. But obviously the training is based on the code, which no longer applies to some of the committee members who take the oath and to complete a conflict of interest.
Can I ask the question? No longer applies? It never has applied to those.
Well, it did apply. Well, it did apply initially. Yes, it did apply initially.
Based on the ethics ordinance, the
it-
original,
Based on the original ethics ordinance, it applied.
yeah,
And conflict of interest applied to everyone who signed the form.
right,
And when the forms were updated in 2019, the ethics code did apply to everyone.
right,
And then what happened in 2021, when there was that last minute decision to remove some committee members from being covered under chapter 4, that's when the coverage ended. But according to the previous village manager, there was some confusion whether the amendment superseded regulation, which he initially thought it did not have members. So we had a year where those members that were required by the regulation to complete the form did not complete the form. But then he came back after, I thought he spoke with you because that's who he was going to speak with, or maybe Ron, and came back and had all of those committee members sign the form and said the regulation was still in effect. And we immediately brought
I'm
the
assuming
conflict.
it's Wrong, I play a
Okay,
lawyer
so-
on TV, but
Well,
these are questions.
Well,
for counsel.
yeah, I was told he was going to talk to Andrew
Yeah.
and Ron, so,
Yeah.
because I offered to have an ethics committee meeting.
Okay,
And as I said, there was one year where they didn't fill out the form, and then the next year, the ethics committee did not direct anyone.
okay,
The village manager said that the regulations still stood, but that there was a conflict.
okay.
And we immediately in September of that year, after being appointed, brought the conflict to, was that a long way of answering your question?
Yeah, okay, thank
All
you.
right, yeah.
May I just
Yeah.
add, as Lori is continuing this thoughtful outbrief. I think what we can do as a council, some of these are administrative, but I don't think this is the time for us to address these one by one. I
No,
mean,
no,
this
no.
is something.
I
that
think
we
this is
can-
gonna be helpful to.
Yeah.
I
if
do
you
have other
can-
questions.
yeah. For us, yeah, I think you sent me,
I mean,
yeah.
some are addressable,
Right.
but this is just not the time or place for it.
yeah, right, yeah. Okay,
Okay, I have one more question.
Yeah.
So, as a matter of good governance and to close holes in the village ethics provisions, will the council address and fix the inconsistency between the code and the village's regulation requiring all committee members, not just those specified in the code and defined as officials, to complete the conflict of interest questionnaires and take oath of offices? And I just want to give a little history on that. I know Ron has said publicly in a recent meeting, I think it was January, that there shouldn't be a conflict between the regulations and the village code. But looking back through the minutes, I went back to 2015, where Ron spoke much more at length about all of the inconsistencies in the code. And the council actually paid a compliance company to come in and to look at the inconsistencies so that to remove them from the code.
mhm,
So that's it. And we look forward to your answers.
thank you,
Awesome.
thanks, Lori.
May I, you want to have any?
Look, is what you just said, we don't have a copy of that, right?
And Andrew has a copy, but I can send you a copy.
Yeah, it should be part of the record, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, in fact, this whole thing could be part of the record if you.
And last month's report, which I was included as an attachment right behind the minutes in
Yeah.
today's packet. So
Okay.
we can do the same for next month if you want to send that to me.
Okay.
That's okay, with the council, I'm happy to
That'd be
send a
great.
copy of this report so that you have a copy in the record.
that would be great.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Lori.
Excellent.
Do you have a
Sure,
comment?
just a brief. First of all, Lori, thank you. And I would like to think that if we reflect back on the last council meeting, and Joel, I really appreciated your thoughts on civility and tone is, Laura, you and I were sitting next to each other, and I know you had gone through a very detailed outbrief from another member of the ethics committee. And then, you know, I had my sort of quick rundown and, you know, we took a vote, and as Andrew, I think very appropriately said, it was democracy. And I would just say in a very kind, respectful way, I don't know, I didn't really see it as a rejection. I mean, we take votes on things all the time. There are times that we decide to adopt, there are times that we don't. We had a very good democratic debate, and we decided Arthur had the greatest quote that really simplified it, but I won't go into it, is there is a decision just not to extend it, but that is not what this time is. But I just wanted to frame that. I don't like to I didn't see it as a rejection. I saw it as a very thoughtful debate, and at the end of the day, the council, in my opinion, made a good decision, but that's for interpretation.
Well,
Um,
Susan and I stood
Yes.
along with the recommendations.
And we're sitting, and
Why that's such an oddity? You seem
No,
excited.
no, I'm just highlighting that we took the recommendation from the ethics
look,
committee.
we're sitting next to each other. We're not arm wrestling. It's all good.
Yeah.
But I did want to just put out as that, and I say it with all, great deference and respect, that again, not for today. I thought there were some things that also came up, which I think there was some agreement. There was some language, that we talked about around definitions. I did present a 6-point plan. I think that there are some things that we want to continue to talk about that. And then, there are some other things that came up during the course of discussion. But again, this is all in the spirit of working together, and it's all goodness. I think we're not the council, the sun rises, and it's all good onwards. And I think that we're, ethical. We've got a committee. They have some authorities over those that have public trust. There is a decision that if you aren't covered for good reasons, and I think we can come up with some solutions on the things that you had suggested in very, very, very straightforward ways. So all good.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. All right, moving on to the discussion and possible introduction of a charter amendment number 2023-1 to amend section 301 of the Village of Martin's Additions Charter. I think to kind of simplify this conversation, I would call on Ron to explain the change, the existing language and what we're proposing to change, something that was flagged to us, obviously, with this article and the move in Annapolis. That would be helpful.
But there, I think Ron will say there are, in addition to those, there were some court cases that established that the non-resident property owner violates the 14th Amendment. But Ron, the floor is yours.
Thank you, council members. Right now, the charter provides that a qualified voter is any person who owns property or any resident of Martin's Additions who is 18 years of age or over. And there is case law, as Arthur noted, that provides if you enfranchise non-resident property owners, you may be violating the Equal Protection Clause. You may be inadvertently discriminating against minorities because historically in this country, minorities are less likely to be property owners, and therefore their votes can be diluted by non-resident property owners who are allowed to vote even though they're not residents. And the ACLU has brought cases against municipalities that have had these charter provisions. The Maryland Municipal League has recommended that you consider changing it, irrespective of legislation. So, I will say that in Martin's Additions, of course, there's been no intent to discriminate or enfranchise non-resident property owners. And, I haven't done the research into the history, but I imagine there's probably not that many non-resident property owners who have voted in our small town. But I think there's an easy fix, and that would be to delete the phrase "who owns property or any resident of," and then to address the comments that have been submitted by some of our residents, that we wouldn't want the unintended consequence of disallowing someone to vote who still legally resides here for voting purposes, but who may be temporarily away, such as those in the military service. So we could also add a sentence, as used herein, residence means the location deemed one's permanent abode and single domicile in the United States for voting purposes, and where one intends to return after a temporary residence elsewhere. And that's language I offered to the town of Somerset. They put it in their charter recently. And that would cover college students, those temporarily away for hospice care. Frankly, it's impossible to think of and capture everything. Sometimes during elections, we have to have our election committee address qualifications issues, but I think this would give us a pretty good coverage.
And this would cover, folks in the foreign service, folks whose companies might send them abroad for a 2-year stint.
Yeah.
And would this allow folks that are doing exactly that, who are temporarily overseas, but are renting out their homes?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, because going overseas, you're not changing your domicile in the United States for voting
Right.
purposes.
Right.
Martin's Additions would still be your voting domicile for US elections.
Right, and those renting those homes are also voters,
Correct.
right? Okay.
If you go away temporarily, but vote in another jurisdiction, you cannot vote here. You can't
Yeah.
vote in 2 places.
Right.
Correct. In another United States jurisdiction. I mean,
Right.
if you're temporarily overseas and you're allowed to vote over there, that doesn't concern us. But you can only vote in one domicile in the United States.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
this to me is common sense, so,
Especially that last part.
I guess I'd ask if anyone would like to.
I will move to introduce
Okay.
Charter Amendment number 2023-1.
And I'll second.
Second, Susan seconds, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
So it is so introduced.
So as Marty noted, this does require a public hearing, which could be at your next meeting. We have to have a public hearing, and if it's adopted at that meeting, then we would also publish it in the newspaper, and the residents, if they didn't like it, could petition that amendment to referendum.
All right, okay, pardon me. Okay, thank you, Ron. That was super helpful, succinct and moving on. So we're now.
I'm sorry, no,
Yeah, go
no, just one thing, and again, we don't have to necessarily decide at this moment, but that whole idea of you do the public forum at the same day of a vote for an adoption. I just defer, we don't necessarily have to do it
Yeah.
right now, but I know that there were some residents who were particularly concerned and had some opinions, and, again, it may be an opportunity to have it a little bit of a separate space.
We have a little bit more time for this one, right? Because it requires not the usual 30 days, but 45. So and I know we're kind of piling on a lot of listening type sessions and or meetings. So let's discuss with Michael, because I think we in our last meeting did say that this would warrant a listening session.
Okay.
So
I appreciate that. And one last thing, I do apologize, Andrew. I know we're keeping the time, but one thing, and again, this is not for discussion now, but perhaps another time, is something that was mentioned about the idea of what happens to other resident volunteers, or if there's a complaint. It sounded like there may be a big gaping hole, but I think we all recognize that there is the authority of the council to always receive or hear a complaint.
Or
So-
refer to the,
Or-
or
yes.
refer to the.
So there is a very important avenue, and I just want to say, it's not as if the council of the village is going to collapse. There is the authority for us to take action. There's an authority for us to receive complaints, and an authority for us to refer as well. So again, I just want to state for the record that we're in good standing, and we'll follow up as needed to close some loopholes if needed.
excellent. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, just moving on to the discussion of introduced fiscal year 2024 budget ordinance 2023-2 and tax rates resolution number 2023-3. Is this something that you want to talk about?
Yeah.
Arthur?
Well, we introduced the first draft of the budget at the last meeting. We will adopt it at the May on the May 11th meeting. It has to be adopted by May 15th. After introducing the budget last month, we had some comments from our council, Ron, and others. And so we made some amendments here. And I wanted to go over these amendments quickly. One is that the American Rescue Plan Act that granted under COVID funds from the federal government over $800,000 to the village This has to be spent over the next 2 years, but it also has to be noted in the budget where that money is being spent. So in this new amended budget, we have taken the advantage of the amendments to put 3 asterisks down in the listed budget, in the list of budget accounts and numbers, and to specifically mention in the memo those areas where we will be spending the ARPA funds. They are for capital projects and for large continuing government functions. And I think that the way the ARPA has been interpreted by the Treasury Department is that you can fund normal government operations under this. So we wanted to make sure that this was as normal as could be, and big ones to absorb the funds. So in the capital projects, we have 4 on the table now at various stages of moving forward. Brookville Road sidewalk, widening of Quincy Street to allow the emergency vehicles to get through, upgrading the Taylor Street storm drain, which was supposed to flood every 100-year flood, which we are now getting about once a year. And the storm drain just cannot handle that volume of water. That will involve trenching the total length of Taylor, putting in much larger storm drain in there. And then out into the park where surfaces in the creek. And then streetlights. Our streetlight engineer, lighting engineer will be doing a walkthrough in a month or 2 when the leaves are all out, looking particularly at the dark spaces. And then we will be putting in some filling in lights there. The other areas are managerial officer salaries, street cleaning, waste collection, and the capital expenditures. We are increasing property tax. We had intended to put our property tax from 5 cents per $100 assessed value to 0. It was brought to our attention that that could jeopardize our county revenue sharing funds with the argument that if you don't need property tax, why do you need our money? So we have the experience of Chevy Chase Section 3 that has a 2 cents per 100 property tax. And so we are proposing to move the property tax down from 5 cents to 2 cents. So the charge for Martin's Addition, not your total property bill, but for Martin's Addition, for a house or property that is assessed at $1 million, your property tax bill will go from $500 down to $200. Now, somebody's going to say, I'm paying $15,000 in property tax. Well, that's going to the county, it's going to the sewers, it's going to a lot of other folks. We're only getting right now $500 of that, down to $200. We are increasing expenditures for community events, for election, because they're charging us more, and for community events, which seem to be so popular, we're giving you more money. So we can have another party. And we're also submitting 4 additional services for the community and council to vote on at the May meeting. Composting, I won't go through it, you can read it, it's in the packet. Sidewalk snow shoveling, management support, let me just add something to that. All these various capital projects involve coordination with county, with the state, and with utilities. And if you ever tried working with the state highway administration, it's not easy. Just getting them on the phone. So we are seeking support for these kinds of programs. And senior support, aging in place. We've talked about that before. We are putting in funding here for a small pilot project for $6,000. So it's all in the packet, take a look. And we will be voting on this in May.
Thanks, Arthur. I just want to personally say, I'm really excited about some of these plus ups and some of our meetings where we've discussed this, particularly Brookville Road. And thank you, Michael, for working with the state. We're not waiting on the state anymore. It's their jurisdiction, but in coordination, they're happy to take our funds, which we might be reimbursed eventually, but I think it's great that we're finally addressing something that they've been sitting on their hands and not dealing with. And the community events, I mean, we all saw it at La Ferme, and there are many other things I'm excited about here. But it was such an amazing experience for a lot of residents that I think, why only have one of those? Why not have two and maybe more movie nights and all that? So I think this is a great, the snow shoveling as well. I think this is a great reflection of, again, our values and what is important to a lot of residents. So this is great.
And a few things working with the state highway administration has been a problem. Where do we try putting the storm sewer in?
Yeah.
Dealing with the county and WSSC
Right.
and contractors. It's gonna be.
And that storm drain actually at the intersection of Chestnut and Taylor, I believe, is where it kind of bogs
Flood
down.
work,
And
flood.
that's, so it's not Brookville.
But it had to
it's
start,
Chestnut.
the plan is to start at Brookville.
I have an
and work
update
all
for
the
us
way
in my
down.
manager's report. when we
Okay,
get there.
we'll wait for the update.
Okay,
The manager's
that's-
report.
That's the budget.
Okay,
Is this the time where we chat about it or?
Yeah, if you want.
Okay.
yeah.
Anyone, I seem like, I feel like I've talked too much tonight, but just a couple thoughts.
Yeah.
First of all, again, Arthur, magnificent, you're just every year and just your in general, your management and oversight of the details, and there's just such a level of trust between us and the community. It's hard. to express it.
I just remembered something. Marty asked before, how much money do we have in the bank? I forgot about that. Roughly $4.5 million. Is in the MLGIP account. Okay, sorry.
You've made me speechless after that, so it's hard to, but no, in all seriousness, so. An innocuous question, I've asked it before, but for those who perhaps are new or, joining for the first time. So let's say, for example, we know that we're making investments in infrastructure and other pieces, but we know it's a big concern. And let's say that there are some things that happen, a climate event or something that we just don't anticipate, and there are things that we do need to fix. So I just want to, on that note, the idea of that as a council, just making a statement, we have discretion because we have this large amount of money that is in reserves. We can activate that. It would take a vote, but as we pass this budget, we certainly have the flexibility as a council to deal with things, or for example, if residents, if there's just at a meeting or a forum, something comes up,
you can always vote on it.
we can vote on it. So again, just putting that out there. And then I want to add, another little piece to this, which I'd say innocuous, but I know it's come up a lot, is I noticed like the IT budget is going down by about 3,000, but we also recognize that there's been an awful lot of discussion of how do we improve communication between residents and the office. And, I know this is a big discussion on listservs and things, but, researching sort of this more than, a way for that type of communication. So I just put that out there that does take research. We're not ready to make a spend on it. It's probably an issue for the next council, but that is also another example that if something comes up where you find the greatest thing since sliced bread that allows us to up our game a little bit with some interaction, and Ron, doesn't raise his hand about to jump at us because it's gonna, break some sort of rules, then
Yeah.
maybe we have room for it.
And so can you unmute Ron just because he has his hand up? You want to chime in there, Ron?
Sure, yeah, just wanted to add to what Jeff said, just so everybody's aware, everybody's probably already aware. Because the budget is subject to a state law process for adoption, like an ordinance requiring introduction, then the opportunity for public comment. State law provides that if you're gonna later appropriate money that wasn't appropriated in the budget, it requires a supermajority vote of the council. So just wanted to add that to Jeff's explanation.
Okay, that's helpful.
And supermajority on a council of 5
It would be
is
4.
4. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That's fair enough. And also, as Arthur mentioned, these 100-year events that are happening once a year, they're happening more than once a year. And we've seen it come down Taylor. The rapids, you need a kayak to head down there.
And let me just add to that, this afternoon, I participated in my 65th college MIT reunion online. And a friend of mine who's a meteorologist gave a talk on the greater frequency and intensity of hurricanes. And the curves he had are frightening. They are getting more frequent and more powerful, and we are going to be getting more rain more often in biggies. So this is just to reinforce the 100-year storm that's happening every year now and flooding Taylor Street and probably other things. Yeah, I just have to say there are a lot of old people at that college reunion.
Well, you were a child prodigy.
I was,
At
yeah.
5 years old, you arrived at MIT. Good. So I see one hand before we go and vote on this, Larry.
Arthur, do we have, first off, does everybody know the deadline of 2 years? When is that deadline that we have to spend the money? And are we, are we actually, you know, making sure, are we funding everything so we'll make that deadline?
So I can comment on this. This is Michael. Everything has to be allocated in the next 2 fiscal years. If you add up the math there of everything we allocated there, we're well over half of the revenue that we made from the ARPA funds. So we would do the same thing for FY25. And as long as we allocate it by the end of 24, so it's in the budget. We don't actually have to spend it yet. We just have to, it has to be in the budget allocated.
26.
Okay.
And
And then, Ron, Ron,
December 30, 2026.
Yeah, so it has to be spent by December 30, 2026.
But allocated by the end of 2024.
Correct.
and Ron, I just have a quick question. If my wife makes me sleep in the yard, does that, am I still a resident? Can I vote?
Well,
Yes.
You've been doing it every night.
Yes, as
for the
as
last
long as
20
you don't
years.
declare yourself a independent sovereign.
Yeah.
And if you put it in the doghouse, it doesn't count.
You plant a flag back there and declare it, yeah, okay. Thank you, Larry. So I'd love to have someone motion or move
Yeah,
to introduce.
so we have a resolution to adopt the property tax of 2 cents per hundred.
Well, hang on.
We had it, we introduced
Every-
it last week,
It was introduced.
last month.
All we're talking about today is a discussion of changes. We passed the budget at our annual meeting, which has to happen in the first part of May,
Right.
which is why we moved up the May meeting to 3 weeks from tonight on May 11th, so that we can pass this budget. So
Right.
tonight was just a discussion. The only thing that we could potentially vote on is the 4 additional expenditures that Arthur listed, but we could also do that at the May meeting.
Okay, let's
It's
do
up
that
to-
at the May meeting, right, okay,
Good.
thank you,
Okay.
Michael.
Yeah.
Treasurer's report, are we skipping or?
Now, let me just say, our revenues, and this is where we are in this economy, where Martin's addition in the economy is, who knows, we are getting higher revenues than we've ever gotten. Even though we're likely moving into an economic slowdown, if not a recession. So planning for next year is pulling it out of a hat. So I had to come up with some budgeted number, which is more traditional than we've actually done in the past, than we've actually received. So that's the only thing I want to say about the budget. Our revenues are up for grabs.
Okay, I did want to say that I'd love to move the manager's report in future council meetings higher up on the agenda. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. we need to find some spaces.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, sure did.
Yeah, just before we do that, I did want to just make a comment, Arthur, and again, this is not,
Right.
I was gonna say, this isn't necessarily the time to do it, and maybe it's at the meeting where there's a vote. But I just want to acknowledge there's been an awful lot of very thoughtful research and discussion on this whole tax rebate issue. And we know that residents have, you know, it's an issue that resonates. And again, I just want to say and acknowledge that this has been really thoroughly researched.
At the next meeting, should we summarize where we are on that?
Yeah,
I've had input from residents and from Ron.
yeah,
So I think we should summarize that. Okay. thank
yeah,
you.
I think Ron.
I was going to do it tonight and then we've had other things.
Okay. Sorry, I skipped over the parking. I'm so
Okay,
excited to see the treasurer's report. I think just a quick review of what's been going on. Once upon a time, the village had curbs painted yellow for no parking. That was changed to actual no parking signs, and that did not necessarily align with these yellow curbs because changes were made as to
Well,
where.
let me
Yeah.
the curbs that were painted yellow were a kind of a random affair. Some, and they were behind people's driveways on the other side of the street. Somewhere, it was a walking up and down, like, how does this one look? Okay, spray it, that's it. So there wasn't a traffic engineer, it wasn't legal, actually, they're unenforceable. So it was a casual activity.
If I can
Go ahead.
maybe
please.
summarize this, we've received multiple complaints from people that they can't get out of their driveways because there's parking directly across the street from their driveways. That's a valid complaint, and you all can decide if we want to remove those parking spaces. The two addresses for those are 7200 Dellfield and 3505 Cummings Lane. Both of those addresses have currently legal parking spaces across the street. So that's the first issue. And I think that we should separate it from the painting the curbs discussion, because right now there's legal parking spaces across the street. Does this council want to get into the business of removing parking spaces when people request it because they're having a hard time getting out of their driveway? That's the first issue that you all can consider. The second one is how do we indicate in this village no parking? Arthur is right. I've talked to 2 engineers about this week. Paint by itself is not an enforceable method of indicating no parking. It can be an additive. If you already have signage, you can paint your curb to indicate no parking. Or if there's a statue that says you can't park in front of a fire hydrant, you can paint the fire hydrant, yellow, but no one's ticketing based off of the painted yellow. They're ticketed off of something else, either signage or legislation. So the first issue, I think, is the one that actually matters, is this a legal parking space across from this person's driveway? I know several of you have talked to this resident, and I told the other resident on Dellfield that I would tell you all about this complaint. I have a feeling there's a lot of other people in the wings who, once you remove one public parking space, are going to want theirs in front of their house removed as well. So that's, and I've heard complaints over my time here, and I always say the same thing. This is an issue for the council, but there's many people that want more parking. We have narrow streets and limited parking, and there are some people that want to remove parking. So it's a controversial issue, and that's the summary.
Yeah, as someone who has had to learn how to really, turn
tires.
the tires sooner than used to get out of his driveway when someone's parked across the street. I get it, but I also know it's opening a can of worms. as
But it's
well.
also usually, not always, but usually possible through tight turning
Yeah.
to get out.
The question is, do we need to, and we'll answer some of the raised hands and Lori here. Would this require a Joe Kutro or someone to go around and say, look, this driveway is wide enough, you can manage, with backup cameras or not, there's even if there's a landscaping vehicle in front of your door, it's possible. Is it inconvenient? Sure, but so maybe we need a less subjective and more objective analysis on these requests going forward. Lori.
Okay, a couple of things. First off, I know in walkability, that was one of our recommendations, was to paint the curb yellow by hydrants and at intersections to just reinforce that. And that would be reinforcing an actual law. But speaking on Cummings, and I'm actually in the minutes, like in 2010 or something, saying, no, we're not going to paint the curb behind her driveway. But Maryland or Montgomery County law is 5 feet on each side of an apron.
That's on the same side as the driveway, not across the street.
Right, but the driveways on Cummings are set so that they're diagonal, like the spot that I wanted to paint was within 5 feet of an apron. And it was also within 15 feet of a hydrant, so there was really no reason not to paint it. But if you look at Cummings, a lot of those driveways that lost the paint were within 5 feet of that apron. And I know the other jurisdictions, like I was at an event at Chevy Chase Village, and the police force was out there with their measuring tapes and measuring to make sure cars were not parked within 5 feet. And there's two reasons for that. One, the planning of the driveways was that they would somewhat be adjacent, so it would help you back out. But it's also visibility for the person on the same side of the street. And streets like Cummings and Thornapple, Cummings is 17 feet wide at some portions of the street, which makes it exceptionally challenging given the volume on this, the traffic volume, still some of the speeds. And then I have pictures from today of
Yeah,
tractor trailers parked in front of the hydrant who put a cone behind my driveway.
yeah,
And I'm at the top of the hill. It's dangerous.
yeah.
And I know of 6 accidents that have happened on Cummings, people trying to get out of their driveways. And I know Maryland has contributory law. They're like one of 4 states where if you're parked illegally and you hit their car, then your insurance company doesn't necessarily have to pay for the damage on there. So.
Well, I get it.
It's been a burning issue.
Yeah,
And then-
and Turner's
Yeah.
we're even more narrow, Turner, and we have the same issue that and I don't think this 5 feet from a driveway would work on Turner at all. There would be no
But that's
space
the law.
left.
That's.
Yeah,
right.
but,
That's-
I mean-
The additional
It's not that the
concerns.
5 feet
Yeah.
would work.
Yeah.
That's the law. Like
Yeah.
I could call right now and say, call Montgomery County Police and say someone's parked within 5 feet and it's blocking my visibility.
Wow.
And now whether they issue a ticket or not, that would be the
Well,
police.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's what they do in the surrounding jurisdictions.
Yeah.
And then there's gonna be 2 major building projects on Cummings Lane, and I think this resident is concerned. She's already saying the parking is a hot mess and she has challenges getting out, and then you factor in, broke ground, all the vehicles that are coming through,
Yeah.
the Amazon
Yeah,
truck that
yeah.
comes through, the
Yeah.
the mail delivery
Well,
truck that comes
traffic
through.
has really picked up
And
on Cummings since
yeah.
the
Exactly.
pandemic
Yeah.
has eased.
So,
Call on Doug.
yes, I would say Doug, yes. 'Cause he-
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much for raising this. So I just want to put on the map 2 factors that I think need to be considered in this on this issue. So I live at 3503, so next to 3505, but we share the driveway. And because it's a shared driveway and it's a small shared driveway, what that means is when there are 2 cars in the driveway, in order to back out, now I have to tell you, I learned to drive. I grew up in Manhattan. I pride myself on being a parallel parker and being able to get in and out of any tight space. But you cannot start to turn the wheel when you're backing out of the shared driveway until the front of your car clears the back of your neighbor's car. And when there is a car, an ordinary car, parked right behind us across the street, it's a minor inconvenience. It does take, you have to do, as you all noted, you just have to do several different turns and then you're out. That's not the issue. The issue is when Rolling Acres or any of the other landscape companies or Amazon or UPS or anything with an extra wide vehicle, and as Katie noted, we're going to have a lot of those with this construction on the street. I have been in situations where I cannot back up enough to start to turn the wheel. I'm trapped in my driveway, have not been able to get to work without driving onto my lawn or incurring damage to the bottom of my car. So it is a unique situation because it's a shared driveway and it is a relatively rare occurrence, 1, 2, 3, 4 times a year, but it happens. It has prevented me from getting to work on time and getting to work at all. And with the experience when the houses across the street went up about 10, 15 years ago, where we had very uncooperative builders and developers who refused to move, it was a problem. So we're anticipating that. And then the second factor I'd note is when we moved in 20 years ago, there was across the street, there was the yellow curb, but more importantly, in the sidewalk, in the concrete sidewalk, there was a pole and a no parking sign. And for one reason that to this day, for some reason to this day that I do not know, one day we woke up and the village had removed it. So it had been there, it was there, and the problems started to occur after that sign was removed. So I would suggest that we get that sign back.
Okay, that's super helpful, Doug. Thank you.
Sure. No, and let me just also add too, and I'm sorry, I joined the call 8 minutes late and I missed the building administrator's report, but I just wanted to note that, you know, this was one of the issues raised at the residents meeting with the developer for 3417, 3419 Cummings. But there were several other issues raised at the meeting, and it was a long meeting. And just in last month's village council meeting, where the readout was given that it was a short meeting with no major concerns, just parking and noise. That wasn't accurate. That there were major concerns. It was a long meeting, and those concerns were not limited to parking and noise. So I just wanted to correct the record on that.
Yeah, I know, and I heard that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
So maybe a quick question, and I apologize. First of all, thank you. I mean, these comments and all the history of the walkability and, you know, so there's been so much and rich information there. So the question, I wasn't sure that this, is there a decision? Because I think, you know, first of all, you know, I'm happy to just share very quickly is, I mean, there's obviously a case by case, right? I mean, we're always as a council, when something acute comes up, we need to, I mean, just my thoughts is to consider it. But then I think there are these other pieces of enforceability, in particular with, you know, when there's developers, you know, around the time frame of when they should start or not, and you know, so anyway, this is not the time for it, but certainly we can help improve it and address one by one.
We've heard many nightmare stories and experienced a lot of those with developers, as well as Joel, who's smiling, can attest. So maybe even a reason he's running.
Should we?
It is, Andrew.
Yeah.
Should we direct to get the traffic engineer?
Yes, I would ask that we direct Michael to get Joe to look at these specific locations that have been flagged
Okay.
and make a recommendation. And if in fact, a sign was removed overnight in the, you know, the dark of night, for whatever random reason, if there isn't a reason, then signs should go up again.
But I still have a question about the issue of the yellow paint, because this one resident in particular is convinced that yellow paint will help. And so when I reached out to the council to look into this, I was told that Joe Cutro and traffic engineers today just don't like it. I don't like Mondays, but I get up and do it. So I just like, is it because of environmental issues? Like, I think we just need to explain to residents who, you know, I think they need some.
Okay, from what I understand, but if I remember these conversations correctly, it's like an excess of instructions and signage and things. So you have signs, you have paint, you have different color paints, and they say it's confusing. And it gets so confusing, it gets ignored. So if you're going to have no parking, it should be a standard way of no parking signs that say it.
But
So that's the
we also
reason.
just discussed that it could be an enhancement to where signs are for someone who's not looking up, maybe sees a yellow curb and then looks up and sees a no parking. So it could be an additive. It doesn't.
And Katie, you have Ron has taken himself off mute button.
Oh, okay,
So,
so, well, I just
Ron-
would say, I mean, this one resident is very passionate and might even, you know, has said that they might pull an Arnold Schwarzenegger, didn't Arnold, fill in a pothole?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that they are, and I didn't realize it was a shared driveway, so that impacts
It's,
two
it's,
households.
I mean, I looked at it, it's a,
It is a type.
it's a big driveway where it's not a shared one.
Mhm.
And so I understand Doug's challenge is when the neighbor's car is at the exact location where he needs to.
And no, just
Ron,
Ron,
did
you
you
have
have
something
comments?
that you need to.
Yeah, I don't want to misquote Joe Cutro, but I think the point he was making and that Lori was describing is the county code and the village code and maybe state law as well, I'll have to check, do not make it a parking infraction to park next to a yellow curb. The codes provide you cannot park in violation of an official sign. Or, so that's why you need the sign with the yellow curb. There needs to be a sign there that says no parking here to the curb or whatever. Or have a code provision that expressly says you may not park adjacent to yellow curbing. I think
Okay.
that's the point. The village code does not currently do that.
Okay,
Fine.
that's helpful.
I just wanted to represent the yellow paint party. That's all.
Yeah,
I just
yeah, yeah.
wanted to get their name.
We can go to Larry and then we're going to the manager's report. Larry?
Yeah, so a couple of things. When I was on the walkability committee and did the research on this, one of the things is that the 3 E's that Vision Zero, I don't want to go into what Vision Zero is, but I'm sure most of you are aware of it. Since it's adopted by the county and the state. It says that it requires education, enforcement, and engineering, and yellow, painting the curbs yellow is part of that educational communication. The other issue is it may very well be that you paint them yellow, and if necessary, use a stencil there to say no parking on the yellow paint in black. Because a lot of people don't want to have the signs sticking up. They think they're ugly in the vegetation look. So there may be a way of using the yellow as the sign by stenciling the statement on it.
Okay, okay, thank you, Larry. Okay, manager's report, please.
Yes, thank you. I put out an org chart. From my understanding, it's the first one the village has ever had. And I wanted to try to capture for my own sanity. Andrew keeps saying how organized I am, so this is part of that. Tried to capture everything this village does on one piece of paper. That's on page 28 in your packet.
I noticed an amendment to it that you had village residents at the top. Good move. I don't think that was.
Oh, no, that's
first
there.
one.
That's a part of my philosophy.
They are the bosses.
I serve the residents, yeah.
Okay,
And I want to give these reports kind of in line with this structure. So I just want to start off going through kind of the 4 departments that are divisions that are under my management here in the office. So starting with administration, there's a couple of things to highlight that you all should be aware of. The May council meeting, as I said earlier, has been moved up to May 11th to accommodate the budget. That's important. Our QuickBooks license, that's how we do our accounting, is expiring at the end of May. So we need to research options. I would like to save us some money and move to a web-based version, but we'll look into that and I'll make a recommendation.
Have you heard from the accountant on that?
They're busy with tax deadline. That was this week. So they're hoping to set up a meeting with me over the next week or so. Yep. The May Martin's Editions newsletter is due at the end of next week. I've asked Arthur to step in and write something for the council corner section. And he's agreed. So thank you, Arthur.
Thank you, Arthur. Already has it.
The Shepherd Street Block Party, they submitted an application and I hadn't actually seen the policy or the application form until they did. So this is new to me. So I wanted to bring it up to you. The policy that Susan referenced earlier is on page 29 of your packet. So you all can take a look at that. It's pretty short. And it doesn't actually make clear who approves these block parties. They submit an application to me, but that's a little vague for me. So I guess I do need some direction from you all as far as how much do I support this? What do I do? What's the next steps? Jean Sperling lives on the street and has, a lot of experience and has been kind enough to explain what she used to do for these types of events. But there's been a request to close the street and let the different, emergency services know that that's happening and maybe even produce some signs to do so and maybe even financial support. So I guess that's the question that I have. Financial or other.
Well, when this was discussed, I wasn't even sure after we passed it what we had approved and what we had passed. I kept asking questions about it. Let me just say, I am in favor of block parties. I think it's something that we should be encouraging, not discouraging. I think the reason for having a policy was insurance and access, emergency access. And they were the concerns that were raised at the time. I'm not sure whether, I think we should go back and readdress this whole block party idea with the idea of writing a policy that encourages it, but would that provide public safety and protection?
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree, I totally encourage it, but I also want to make clear that Michael's got enough on his plate.
Right.
And Aaron does with, under Michael's supervision, that he cannot be the person who's gonna be.
Oh, no,
organizing
he's
it.
not gonna
There
organize.
might be some basics where they need assistance,
Mhm.
maybe signage at the, on Shepherd on Brookville and Shepherd on the other end. But we're all willing to be helpful and giving guidance, but this can't consume your time. It's clearly there are folks there that are eager to do it and that are already involved and so, more power to them, but I don't think you have the capacity and the bandwidth to do this.
No, and I recall when we had our, I guess this would have been 17 or 16 on Taylor Street. It was like a potluck, it was all the residents, and we did have the signage and the, clearance, but, yeah, I don't think. the village
Everything
did
else
that.
was organized.
Yeah,
but
it was through the residents on the street, and then I think there was, street by streets, and then we did kind of quadrants, like we did Taylor, then in Delafield, and we all like combined like at one location, but it was all on the residents, like the onus was on the residents. You bring the dishes, you supply everything, and it's like, yeah. and the
There
chairs.
is the last line of the policy says exclusive parties shall not be allowed. That is, if you're having a wedding, you can't have your wedding party out on the street.
No.
Although some communities encourage that. My son lived in Situate, Massachusetts, and that was a major part of the community was private parties, block parties. So,
And the policy also states privately hosted block parties, that has been approved.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So
So,
does that answer?
I definitely feel I'm supportive as well. I love events like this and I'm happy to support in any way I can. So I was just, raising this all because this is my first one. So as is everything.
we'll start a trend, because people will be like, why would you have a party? And they'll- But yeah. we could get that in place, yeah.
So,
I'm waiting for one person to be talking at a time.
okay,
Okay,
We're gonna
is
discuss
that,
that at the meeting on Monday night.
is that guidance? You have guidance?
Yes, thank you. We'll proceed and Keith reminded me, we'll discuss this at the
No.
community engagement meeting on Monday.
Good,
Hope to see you all there. Also with that meeting, we didn't mention the street captains have been all invited to come to that meeting. As we're trying to get them more in sync with what's happening with the committee. So moving on.
Okay.
The Brookville Market, I've received several different complaints from different people about the condition of the Brookville Market area, the parking lot, the front, birds nesting and adding droppings that the people consider a hazard. I got one complaint about the fence across the back. The trash keeps blowing down Taylor Street, and it's kind of become a ongoing thing that I don't really know how to respond to. I understand this is private property and not actually the village's property. We rent here, but I'm not sure if I should just share the owner's information, or if I can make some sort of plea myself or how to go about that. But I've taken the initiative to just start cleaning up the bulletin board because I understand that is something the village constructed almost 10 years ago and needs a facelift. So that's been partially done and there's more coming with that as well. But
I'm not sure, the trash cans outside, we were emptying at one point. I'm not sure if that. are
well,
we-
we definitely did buy new inserts because there were complaints about the rot and the previous ones and trash falling underneath
through.
and rats and all that, even though, again, not sure that was our to do jurisdiction
Well, I
wise,
think
but
we
we did it.
decided to do
Yeah,
it
of
because
course.
of these complaints.
Yeah, because it
We
wasn't
took it
happening.
on
It
ourselves.
wasn't happening just like Brookville Road with the state, so we had to, take these things,
Yeah,
take them on, so. The fence isn't that the Taylor Street property owner there and the Turner Street
Yeah,
property owner? I
yeah.
mean, the wood, I mean, that's.
I'm not
something
sure
that-
who owns the fence, but it's not ours, but
Yeah.
it falls under the same category of people complaining about the condition of the market and
Right.
um
And Joe the manager has been complaining about people using the dumpster.
Yeah, that
and
dumpster's,
throwing trash next to the dumpster.
Yeah.
I mean.
that
so-
dumpster is meant for, and there is a sign on there, it's meant for recycling only, like large cardboard boxes and those types of things.
The super.
And these probably aren't residents, but people are illegally dumping back there and throwing stuff back there. And I don't know what we can do, but I just wanted to raise this as an ongoing complaint I'm getting.
Well, I mean, I know the owner of this property is not gonna like this, but he ultimately, Mr. Shirazi, has responsibility for the upkeep.
Mhm.
And we've reached out to him on that railing that my kids, when they were still at this bus stop, almost toppled over multiple times until it was finally fixed because
Okay.
it was loose. So I don't mind having you provide his contact info. If it's something about the property in disrepair.
Mhm.
I mean, he's the owner.
And if we can do anything on, but the village itself, like with the garbage cans.
Yeah.
We can easily tell the garbage people, these are ours, pick them up.
Okay. Moving on, Doug gave the building report, but I still want to highlight and create an opportunity to, if anyone has any follow-up, or if you're hearing anything or specific complaints, please reach out to me. I highlighted here just a couple things that are outstanding, including 151 Quincy. We're going to have a listening session at some point with the neighbors, and actually invite the owner of the 151 as well to that.
That's
Hopefully,
May 2nd or 3rd, I think, Anand and Joel and the rest of us agreed we could do the evening, so let's just pick one of those and get it scheduled.
yeah. And then 153 Quincy, there's a outstanding driveway permit that we're gonna have a discussion about or look into. So that's coming. 7200 Summit has been closed, and I've returned the bond payment this week. So that was nice to check something off the list. I feel like we keep getting more coming onto the list, but it's nice to close one. So that was good. 162 Quincy, that's one at the very end, past the dead end that we're widening. We didn't know who the owner was. It's an LLC that did the development and owns the property and rents it out. So we were having a hard time getting the right of way agreement that Ron prepared signed by them. We finally figured out who the person was, and he responded to one of my emails. So we're hopeful that is a sign of good things to come, and we can get that right of way agreement for the retaining wall they built in the front there signed. So that's good. And then the last one, and Doug didn't note this, is 3502 Taylor. Their addition is over the 500 square feet, which means it triggers by the code triggers a informational meeting with the adjacent neighbors. So we'll be scheduling that shortly. On the maintenance stuff, I've mentioned the bulletin board. Also, Mulherron and Paula submitted to me her tree update for this meeting as well. And we just want to highlight that it's Arbor Day was this month, and we've done some activities, and it's been really fun. Thank you for everyone that has come out and participated in that. I love our trees and celebrate them, and I go on walks every Friday and invite people to come with me, and thank you to the people that have come with me. They're really fun, and getting to measure the trees and calculate how many breaths it takes a day is really fun. And we talk a lot about water runoff and groundwater issues. Well, you know what solves that? Trees. So that's good. And we do have we did remove a dead tree on Chestnut, and there's several other prunings that are happening. Of course, we always try to save as many trees as possible, but it is sad when they come down, and we'll do a fall planting again this year. So that's that for trees. I did meet with Waste Management this month to just go over a laundry list of complaints and concerns that we have, and trying to improve the communications. They do tend to miss collections, and that's an ongoing complaint. We were promised at that meeting that they'll return if they're not still in the village and they're already gone for the day. Time we hear that something's missed, they'll return the next day, and they just ask that people leave the recycling or trash out so that they don't have to come try to find it and make a trip out here and it not be there when they get back. So
Do we get any sense of why they're missing? Is it just carelessness, or is it? cans are hidden somewhere.
Yeah, I think cars park and stuff, and they are trying to move fast, and they're out here working pretty early, trying to get out of people's way as fast as possible. And
Some have the smaller bins for recycling versus like, regular trash.
yeah, and there's all sorts of issues. I mean, there's complaints that they're picking up the wrong stuff in the wrong trucks, or they're mixing the yard waste with the trash. There's complaints that the cars, that the trash trucks smell bad, which I don't know if we can solve that, but that they're leaking oil, and there wasn't a case where one of the trucks broke down. There's just been a lot of issues, and hopefully things will smooth out. I know the bulk trash was missed, was another one. That was a bad situation where,
Parking, the residents don't like if the spare vehicle is parked in front of their.
yeah,
stretch.
thank you for bringing that up to Katie. Yeah, the other complaint that we get all the time is that they bring 2 trucks to the village, one for yard waste and one for garbage waste on Mondays, and they park the other truck on Taylor Street, which is unpleasant to have a truck sitting in a street that smells bad for 4 hours on
I'm
Monday
not
morning.
complaining.
I know it's not you, Katie.
Down there next to my house.
Yeah, we'll put it by Keith's house. Anyways, yeah, so we did have that meeting, and we're hoping that the communication at least will improve, and we have a commitment that they'll return the next day if they do miss something. So just let us know by the end of the day if they miss something, because they start at 3 a.m. So
Right.
if we don't get it by 5 o'clock when we leave here, then we don't, they're not going to make it back in the morning. So I've been getting requests for leaf bags and recycling bin replacements. The leaf bags, I swear, are an ongoing debate. And I know the county's considering a policy to ban gas-powered leaf blowers, which would cause some major issues for landscaping companies, as well as our rolling acres that vacuums all our streets. So we're keeping an eye on that at the state level as well. So what I've done is I've just started buying one-offs. If you need additional leaf bags, if your trash can is beyond repair, let me know and I'll buy you another one. We have a budget for it, so keep solving people's problems. The ARPA money, we talked about the money and allocating it over the next 2 years. Even though we haven't spent any of the money yet, we haven't even allocated any of the money yet. We still have to fill out the deadline. We still have to fill out the paperwork. And that's due at the end of next week. So I haven't even logged into the Treasury's report from our manager's account. So that's going to be a big project next week that I just became aware of this week. So that one's a big deal. The sidewalk on Raymond Street across from Arthur's house was pretty severely damaged with the result of a dead tree that was taken down and a big stump that was removed. So I have contacted our paving contractor to come and repair that. He's going to try to repair the curb at the same time that also was damaged. So that's in the works. They're hoping to schedule that for May.
Is that curb at the corner of Taylor in the parking lot? Is that ours? You know, that's always like there's a curb when you come from your house and you take a left
Mhm,
into the parking lot.
mhm.
That's always kind of in disrepair. I don't know if that's our village property or.
We can take a look.
The parking lot.
Yeah.
Um,
If
They're
it's in
like
the- if it-
pieces, they were chunks for a
Oh,
while.
yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Okay.
I didn't do that.
No, you didn't. No, we didn't any.
we can take a look and yeah, I mean,
Yes.
the standard policy is to deal with these things one-offs as they come up. So if there's a damage, something that's especially if anything's a tripping hazard or something like that,
Right.
you can let us know and we have a contract to solve it. So it'll just take a while because we have to get that contractor to schedule it and he's busy, of course.
Yep.
So that's it. And the Taylor Street drainage issue, I know I'm going to try to kind of update you all on these ongoing projects that are slow moving, but that are moving forward slowly but surely. The Taylor Street drainage study that we got back from our engineering firm had two possible solutions. One is to run parallel pipes to meet the capacity on either side of the street down into the park. The other one is to increase the capacity of the pipe when there's two drainage pipes that merge there.
Right.
And the other one is to increase the size of the pipe to 66 inches, which is huge. That's more than double what it is now, I believe. So that would be a huge project. We have our village engineer, Doug, has responded to that study with some follow-up questions, and we're waiting for their responses, just some clarifications and some details. We would then need to go to the county and figure out what the next step is for them to get that on the list and approve our plan and recommendation. And that's where that stands right now. So I know there's a lot of thoughts and concerns about that. That is actually not related to the house at, I think it's 3412 that has the sandbags. I know that comes up a lot. And that is an issue. That is an issue with that house's design. They have a plan in place to raise that driveway and close it off. But we haven't heard a follow-up from that. So, but we're eager to approve a plan if they come forward with that. That is an ongoing issue that we're aware of. So, Brookville sidewalk. I have scheduled a meeting to meet with the engineers at the State Highway Administration. That'll happen early next month. They have our plan for a sidewalk that would be ADA compliant. It would be 5 feet wide. It would go the entire length from it would tie into Quincy, which is already 5 feet, right at Quincy is already 5 feet wide. It would tie into that and go all the way to Turner. That is moving forward. They are reviewing it with lots of different departments at the department. I mean ADA, their sidewalk division, it affects the lane width that time. So the State Highway is going to be out here. So we're meeting with all of them. They're also at the same time moving forward with an MOU for a reimbursement. So we would pay for it and they would potentially reimburse us for some of that. That is also happening simultaneously. So I have a contact that's responsive. He copied in everybody. It's happening. I told him I would, bring my engineers to that meeting as well, but that is moving forward. I think it's smart that we're budgeting for it in the next year, because I do think that this should be something that should happen in the next couple of months.
Have you heard anything from WSSC as when they're actually going to put the new lines down?
No idea when WSSC is going to be finished with their mainline project along Brookville. They came in cut, but they they didn't really cut the sidewalk. They're cutting off the sidewalk, but the State Highway Administrations, we're ready to move forward with the sidewalk with or without WSSC being done with their project.
Keep pushing and I'd like to join possibly.
We can look into
Let
that.
me know when
Sure.
you have that.
So you think we should go even if WSSC hasn't, and then they're gonna make cuts?
Yes.
And go and patch it up
Yes,
afterwards?
and the utility
We-
companies
something we can.
come in and make cuts and damage our stuff all the time,
Yeah.
and they are required to refix it. They fix it with the pretty cheap material, and
Right.
then we have to come back and fix it again 2 years later. But
Yeah,
that's an ongoing reality of no matter, there's never a good time. Just do
Yeah.
it. Just fix
We
it.
don't have the luxury of waiting for them,
I know.
because that we're on, like, just the fact that we have this scheduled, I think is huge, just to get the ball rolling and making this happen already.
And
So-
just for a timeline, I mean, I inherited this when I started in November,
Yeah.
but the plan that we got back from the consultant was a year ago that we got that plan back. So this has been a long time, and I think the transition into managers slowed it down, but I'm eager to move forward. This is,
Let's move it.
I think this should be our number one priority.
Yeah.
100%.
So that streetlights, we have heard the residents' complaints about dark spots, and I know the council members are aware of that and have some locations in mind that they have witnessed themselves. I've spoken to our lighting consultant who did our study last time and added our streetlights a couple years ago. He is going to come back this summer when all the leaves are out and do a light study. That'll just cost us a couple of $1,000s to do a full light study to evaluate where dark spots might be. He'll make a recommendation, and then we can go ahead and we're budgeting for about 10 additional streetlights. We don't actually know, but we figure something around there. So we're moving forward with that, and it's the same guy, so that's good, because hopefully we can get the same streetlights that we got last year or something very, very similar. Also, a note on that is Section 3 is in the process of doing what we did a couple years ago of replacing all their lights with LEDs, which as Arthur notes, saves us lots and lots of money on the electrical bill. So that project is also moving forward. The last thing on my report, sorry, this is a long one, is the sewer line. If you look at page 31, WSSC just asked me what permits are required. A contractor for WSSC sent me this map on page 31 of the packet, the last page of the packet, asking me what permits are required to redo, upgrade this entire sewage line that runs right outside the village and actually runs up Bradley. So we're looking into that. I have responded to him and asked for a whole lot more information because that's not a lot, specifically timeline, but this does seem to be, I mean, if improvements are needed, that's one thing. There's also a storm drain that runs along there. So there's a question of whether the storm drain would be impacted or whether they should make improvements to the storm drain at the same time. There's lots of questions this brings up. So I just want to make sure you all are aware of this. WSSC sounds like they're moving forward and they're going to do something with this. So that's good.
This is about years, they were planning this years ago. And the people who live off Western, who back onto that, complained. And they complained so vociferously that you can't come into the easement on the back of my property because that's where the tulips are. And they postponed it, so now they're finally coming back.
Yeah, and I understand there was a water main project that got canned at some point, but this is a sewage line, so I'm not sure if it's actually.
No, you're right, the water line that they were.
Yeah, and they were saying it. Yeah, I asked them how much space they'll need. You know, what residents are impacted, because they should all be involved in knowing what's coming down the pike for them. So,
but we don't permit it. But we should be.
Well, I guess there would be a discussion about, you know, traffic control and all sorts of stuff
Right.
because they're probably closing this part of the street for that. So,
Right, that's the dead end Bradley part, right?
correct.
Yeah.
And that concludes my report. Sorry, it was a long one, but
No.
there's a lot going on.
Andrew, may I just respond very briefly, I promise? I know we're, so first off, just Michael, you're magnificent. Thank you. Truly, you, if we look at the org chart, and again, kudos to the village residents as the lead here on the org chart. I do want to also just showcase in that, am I holding up key? Okay. In the center of that universe is the village manager. And so I know we've heard this term at least 3 or 4 times and seen written burnout. So I think we all agree, and this is more of an HR thing, and it's not necessarily the topic of this one, but I think we want to recognize that we are here to understand the workload, and, you know, we know there's an assistant manager, but there's a lot. And so we want to really be respectful of that and just understand. I know everyone on the council is behind this thought, so I just wanted to share that. The other thing, which is more tongue in cheek, but I'm still waiting, and we're waiting for you with a picture on the trampoline when you walk around. Though I know Ron is gonna take off his microphone and all the legal reasons why you shouldn't get on our trampoline, but maybe, you know, on the side or something like that. Very, very quickly, I did want to mention a thing about the budget. And again, this is not the time for the discussion, but since we were talking about the street pieces and the painting and the signs, I just noticed very briefly, and again, it's under traffic engineering, where we went from 10,000 and we cut it in half to 5,000. And just putting it out there, this is not the discussion, because again, Arthur, but you know, what pool of money that you need to make these modifications, and is that there, or do we have other places that you can pull your magic in case we need it?
I'll respond to the first one first. The burnout thing is real. And I think, I mean, you all know how hard you've been working and how long the last 3-4 meetings. I've been here 5 months. And we should address the turnover in this position. I think there's more reasons for that than just, you know, a couple residents complaining about stuff. I think there's like real work here that needs to get tackled. And there's a lot of things that have just been floating for years. So I'm still finding things that are floating for years and need to get dealt with.
So we have a plus up in the budget. That's part of this, to address this.
So that's the first point. And I'll continue to, you know, advocate for myself as far as, you know, taking leave and using those, you know, opportunities. You know, I think even my walks on Friday, you know, I see those as mental health breaks. So that's that's the first point, and we're happy to have a conversation about that anytime. And I'm going to keep my I would like to keep my report at the end of the meetings, because I think that actually highlights the fact that we have all this other stuff we're talking about and we haven't even gotten to the real work yet. That was intentional. And And to the second point, I think we have a lot of money set aside for capital projects. So sidewalks, curbs,
Yeah.
street designs, street lights, all of that stuff is
That's
budgeted for. The line that's traffic engineering is just our traffic engineer, Joe Kutro. He doesn't do that much. We use him to update our signage. He's slowly updating signage throughout the village. We've just been working from the south end for years. He's been working from the south end to the north end. I think he just did Taylor Street. So
He's kind of done with it now.
so we're actually just aligning the budget with what we actually spent.
Perfect.
So
One
that's
that
the
I
answer to that.
promise,
Yeah,
last
if we could
comment.
address the trampoline.
Oh,
So.
I need to see your home insurance policy before I come.
well, maybe we'll just do a little side thing. So real, and again, this is more for discussion another time, but I think one thing that we've seen repeatedly, and I think there are ways of addressing it is, and again, I know this is one of those where Ron is gonna, perhaps open up the mic, but when residents call with a particular issue or problem around, is it a VMA thing? Or is it a county thing? And, I think the idea of how, and I know these things are probably here and maybe updating, but just how do we build the relationships with certain at least the idea that we could refer residents, or they know us in a way that if we refer a resident, the resident isn't feeling, that we're just kind of, oh, it's a county issue,
Yeah.
right? Just, you gotta call the county. So, and again, I just put that out there because I know in some of the things that have been shared, we've seen with the transition between managers, we see it, and I felt it. I'm sure everyone around this table has felt it as people who have lived here for a while, and I'm not sure how to address it other than, it probably just how do we improve, or how do we make relationships with some of the groups in the county, so that if we do have to refer, there's kind of like a handover, like they know us. And anyway, it's just another.
That's valid. And I do think we need to look at communicating our village code better. I definitely need to stick to the village code, because when I start coloring outside the lines or approving things that may or may not, that's how I would get in trouble. So I use the village code as my defense, but I think our village code building code was passed in 2009. And I know everyone has their thoughts on it. And I do think this council, over the next year or two could absolutely look at revisiting that and opening it up. If nothing else, to just do a communication plan. I think Katie mentioned, Katie, we're talking about doing something similar to that, just to explain different elements of it, because it is a engineering document. And it is confusing when the county code applies and when we have exceptions to the county code and something else applies. So I think a communication plan as well as some updating to our building code would be needed.
But yeah, but I think Jeff is also suggesting when somebody calls, you can say, but the county handles that's water drainage, here's the number to call, ask for Joe. So you can refer people on with a very specific.
That would be
name.
great if I had someone that answered my phone calls at every. Okay.
Anyway, it's a topic, because it's certain,
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks.
Okay,
for
no
hearing.
problem. Pete,
Hope to see everybody Monday night, 7:00. And street captains and residents.
okay, thanks, Keith. Okay, we're going to resident comments. Larry.
First, just on what we just heard is, I heard you were looking at Taylor about the drainage down the driveway. What about my driveway? It's been there for a longer time and never been fixed. That's water coming off of Thornapple down my driveway after WSSC improperly paved the street with too high a crown. And I've been for 3 years now reporting it. Every time there's a severe storm, my basement now floods. Hello?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I was not, Larry, I'm sorry. I wasn't aware. So this is not about driveways. This was about the storm pipe, but
It's
I've
the
heard
same.
this before, this problem before on Turner Lane as well.
I've
down the
reported
street.
this to the village council 5 times. The only
Okay.
person that paid attention to it was Katie.
Okay,
I've
So-
even sent videos of it happening. And it happened after WSSC repaired the sewer line on Thornapple and repaved with a high crown. And the water literally comes up over the curb. It's not just at the apron. It literally comes over the curb and comes down the driveway and floods my house and my neighbor's house.
Yeah, so the question is, I mean, how do we address that? Is that like at AB Beers, we look at situations where, or go to WSSC? I mean, I'm assuming you tried that and it didn't work with going back to WSSC or the village. Yeah. I don't
Well,
know.
Niles told me the engineer, the village engineer looked at it. I know Doug Larmer looked at it. And he's the guy that said to me, yeah, it's crowned too high. No wonder the water's coming down.
Yeah. Well, this is again one
My
of these
point is, it needs
situations.
to be fixed. So
Yeah,
please
okay.
put that in.
So,
Okay.
I have a question that maybe Ron Bolt can answer. And that is, I just looked at the charter and I cannot find a comment, anything about our relationship to the Chevy Chase Fire Department. Do you know where that is, Ron?
There's no relationship.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there is an express reference in the charter or code, but I'll look.
No, there
Okay.
isn't.
So the point is that the Chevy Chase Fire Department is a privately owned company. It does not belong to the county. Those fire engines do not belong to the county. That huge building and that land does not belong to the county. It's a private corporation. Tax money that is partially allocated to Martin's Additions goes to that fire department.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
as a
I
result,
think, Larry, I think you're wrong about that.
well, perhaps I am, but I was on that fire board for 12 years. And every year we had to improve because the fire board, which we're supposed to appoint 3 members to, is the board of directors of that corporation.
Well, there is this peculiar public-private thing. The chief was in here a few months ago.
Right.
It is a county fire department.
No,
that
it's not.
has
It
the-
is a county, the county has control of the employees. They do not own the property or the building or those assets.
Right, okay.
And we are
We
required.
do not support them.
We are required to, we are supposed to appoint 3 members to their board of directors, which is the 3 members that we're supposed to appoint that are called the fire board.
Right.
And we don't have 3 members there. We only have 2. Okay, and when I brought this up just last weekend, you know, the thing come up, where is this? Well, I don't know anything about this, okay? Yet how that fire department functions is critical to your first due area. That the equipment is there that you need. And the county's interest often is to reduce the response on first due. And part of our 3 members is supposed to pay attention as fire board directors, members, to make sure that the interests of and safety of this village and other things are properly maintained. Example, when the house on Summit burned down, one of the reasons it burned to the ground is because the fire hydrant directly across the street had a car parked in front of it and bushes growing around it. And it was not on the fire department. When you looked on the maps on the fire trucks showing up, it wasn't on there. Nobody knew it was there. And those are all safety issues that this village should be making sure are done right. I don't know the last time one of our people we appointed to the fire board looked at the maps on the trucks to ensure that they were up to date with all the fire hydrants. I know for a fact that cars are being parked in front of the fire hydrants. I know we don't have all the members appointed to the board of directors of that fire company protecting our interests. And I know that the demonstration of flushing the fire hydrant that was recently done was not complete and not very comprehensive. So And there's bushes now. In fact, I believe the fellow that did the work said, hey, I can't fully operate and open this hydrant because of the bushes around it. So I'm just asking that that in our work this year, that we include this stuff. And I'm asking that the council appoint the third member to the Chevy Chase Fire Board. The member that we had there got, it's very embarrassing, but she got into a confrontation, let's say, with she's very eccentric. And she got into a confrontation with a couple of the firemen at the meetings and was forced to leave the premises.
Okay, Doug, sorry, Larry, we'll take that under advisement. The third, I mean, Katie and I, we can think of one person already right off the bat who would be great on this fire board. So I appreciate you bringing that to our
But
attention.
where is it in the regulations that you need to even monitor or do it? I don't see them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there is a village duty, Larry. I'll look into that further. I think as Arthur noted, there's quite a history between the county and all the private fire companies.
Right.
And at one point in the 80s, the county assumed control of all
No.
these private boards, but then
No,
allowed them
that is not
to
true.
retain
They
some
assume-
sort of
that's-
their
I-
independent structure. And if you
You
look
remember-
at county chapter 21, you can
Okay.
see the history described there. And
Okay.
the-
And you might
each
see that-
board will have bylaws which specify how board members are appointed. And
Right.
historically, it's my understanding, that's how it's been done.
That's
The
correct.
village might designate people according to the rules of the fire department.
Yes, the key thing that happened in the 80s was that all the private companies, the firemen sued because they were working 24-hour shifts and wanted time and a half and double time for sleeping. And
Okay.
because of that, they all became employees of the county. That was the major change. We still have the power to determine the equipment that's at Station 7 and to approve its budget.
No, we don't.
And we need to
Okay.
appoint people to do that.
Thanks, Larry. Yeah, thanks, Larry. Susan and then Lynn. You on mute.
Sorry about that. I'm happy for Lynn to go first because he was waiting for a while. If Lynn, would you like to speak?
It doesn't matter to me. I can speak now, or if you
Okay.
prefer.
Go for it, Lynn.
All right, the two items. Earlier you were talking about parking difficulties with regard to people's driveways and marking the yellow curb and what's enforceable, what's not. I would like to address parking where there are signs, which I guess are legally enforceable, but they seem to be invitations for contractors to park. I'm at 209 Oxford Street, which is at the corner of Quincy. Quincy Street in the last 2 years or 3 years has been an ongoing construction project at one house or another. At one point in time, there was 4 going on at the same time. What really prompted me to bring this up now today is last week, a resident on Quincy Street, close to the intersection, was visited by a Comcast service person who parked on my side of Oxford Street in the no parking zone where there is clearly a sign for no parking. The vehicle was parked maybe about 3 or 4 feet off the curb and had gone into the house. And it so happened that while this inconsiderate person had parked there, one of the larger trucks from 120 Quincy Street, which is an ongoing project, came down to do a turnaround so that they could do a turnaround and go back up toward Brookville Road. Well, with that Comcast truck there, it just took back and forth about 10 times. So I was wondering if there'd be some way that residents could be encouraged, that they know these people are coming, they've asked for them to come, could be encouraged or maybe told or somewhere or another communication to tell their service vendors, their visitors, whoever is coming to their property, to have those drivers respect the no parking areas and to not park there. 2 days ago, across on Oxford Street, across from me, and again for the servicing the same house, there was an exterior power washing painting operation parked in the no parking area between the sign and Quincy Street, and far off the curb to a point where and then at the time one of the large landscape trucks comes through with a trailer on the back that is as wide as the truck, and squeaking on through, the illegally parked vehicle had a large mirror sticking out. They had to fold it. The landscape truck coming through, they had to fold their mirrors in, and I think I actually heard some sort of a crunch, and there was people on both sides of the vehicle guying it with barely inches or an inch to spare on either side. This is an ongoing event down there at this intersection. I see where the no parking signs are required for that space to be open so that when these large vehicles come through, that they can make the turn and not have to do a whole lot of back and forth. That's particularly true with the collection trucks, the UPS trucks, the FedEx, and then the large construction vehicles. You talked about enforcement of parking earlier, and that just seems to be a non-starter, because it's only the county that's going to, the county police that are going to come there and do anything. And I can very well understand that they have much more important things to be doing. But the situation at Quincy and Oxford, those no parking areas, somewhere or another, the residents have got to be made to know, appreciate, and be sensitive to the fact that they should not allow their visitors, their contractors, or vendors parking in those areas. To hear the beep, 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 it's just an annoyance. And I think it shows a great deal of inconsideration to the rest of the neighborhood. And if something could be done in that regard, I would really appreciate it. That's the end of it, and as far as the yellow on the curb, on the other side there is yellow. I think perhaps on both sides of Oxford Street, where the no parking signs are, from the signs to the corner, it is painted yellow, but it's faded because it was put there a long time ago. But it might help some people. The people driving these vehicles that park in these no parking zones, they may not be well aware, as you all are from the conversation earlier tonight, that the yellow painted curb is not enforceable, that the sign is. But perhaps these people that are not informed of that, when they see the yellow curb, could be told it's there. That means that there's no parking. And along with the sign, but anyway, they shouldn't be putting their vehicles there to begin with. And I would really love something coming from the council to encourage residents to not allow parking anywhere where there's a no parking sign. And that includes the entire length of Quincy Street on the south side. If you're coming off of Brookfield Road, driving down toward Oxford Street, the right side of the street is entirely no parking.
Yep.
Okay. And item number 2.
Thank you, Lynn.
I'm not done.
Oh,
Please.
okay. I thought that was item number 2.
I very much hate that my name being called, indicating that I'm being cut off. And I don't know who spoke that, but I think it's inconsiderate. It really angers me.
Okay, well, apologies when it was Andrew. I thought that was your item number 2 and that you had just concluded.
No. That was a continuation and I shouldn't have not put that on there. So pardon me.
Okay.
The second item is and this has been discussed many times in the past, and that is shoveling sidewalks. And the village should do this either for the senior citizens or for the entire village. And then the argument has always been against it, and it was a non-starter because we had this great big snow megadon, and we have the history of how much it cost at that time. And that, of course, at that time was designated to be a once in a 100-year event. Since then, we could probably measure in an amount of less than 2 feet or 3 feet, the total accumulation that we've had. I would like to propose, or the council to consider, a system, something like condominiums have. They have reserves for the roof. They have reserves for their parking. That the village put into a budget an annual reserve amount for snow. This last year, I don't think they would have spent anything for shoveling sidewalks, and maybe even the year before, and that this money would accumulate, and on an annual basis. Then we get to our snow megadon year, and we would have this built up amount of money, which is designated and cannot be violated. It's only for shoveling sidewalks, and that then, you know, we wouldn't be choking over the fact that we're having spent $70,000 for an item which was not budgeted for that particular calendar year. Is that a conceivable idea that could be, you know, could that be considered?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And as you heard, if you were on for our budget discussion, we've allocated funds now for exactly that purpose, the snow shoveling. We're lucky this past winter where we didn't need it. What I could see us as a council considering the monies allocated, if they were not used, to put in a pot that's exclusively reserved for the next winter. So I think that's a good idea, Lynn. I appreciate it, and we'll definitely have this conversation about that.
All right, please think positive about it, because I think in the long run, you'll have reserves in place that would probably exceed the requirement of a heavy snowfall.
Yeah.
And with that in place, then you could think more positively about either doing all the sidewalks or at least doing it for people of a certain age.
Yeah, and by the way, Lynn, I was just gonna say, sorry for interrupting. With this new proposed plus up for the snow shoveling based on resident requests. As we learned from Ron, as a reminder, if that's not sufficient for our next winter, and we're running into a situation where we're running out of funds, the council can meet and with a supermajority add funds to the budget to prepare for the next snowstorm of that season. So
well, we don't know when we're going to get hit big the next time.
Right.
But we've all been here, I think, since the last one, which was what, 10 years ago, whenever Arthur knows the date.
2010 was Snowmageddon.
Yeah, and so if this concept and idea had been put into place then, at this point, you know, I don't know how much you guys think would be necessary to put in on an annual budget for reserves, exclusive for this purpose, but it would be a large sum of money, and it would more than cover the next megadon.
Yeah.
So if you think in the long term and how mild our winters have been, this seems, I just hope that you can think very positive about this. And I would appreciate your doing so. So with that, I will sign off and thank you for your time. And I regret again that I always take too much time saying whatever I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Lynn, you're a treasurer. This is Jeff. I just want to say one thing, and if there's anyone to just say this about when it's specific to Andrew in terms of the idea of not cutting folks off. I think, Lynn, I just say this, I'm not trying to say that you do this by any way, shape, or form, but because your screen is off, you know, we don't see the effect of you perhaps speaking. So I think that, you know, visually when you're in the room or if you're on the video and you see someone, you'll know that. So I just want to share that with you that, again, you know, appreciating your treasure and knowing.
Well, I don't know if you know, I'm such a low techie. I don't know if I've ever quite figured out how to get me in there so you can see my puss.
Okay,
Awesome.
I'm pushing buttons now, but
don't worry about it.
Let's
We're
see
good.
once.
We're good.
No worries.
Susan?
Oh, there's the maybe if I did that. Oh, there you go.
Good job. Good job,
Yeah,
Lynn.
how about, yeah, all right, so.
Thank
now
you.
See me? No, you don't.
Thank you.
Welcome, Susan.
Hi, thanks. Okay, so I was going to mention about just a general value of safety and walkability for the village, that we have long needed at Bradley and Brookville to have some stop signs on Brookville. And I know this is a state road, but I know that that shouldn't be an insurmountable existential status of the road. I think we can work hopefully with the other sections to try to get stop signs on Brookville and also crosswalks. They're just really needed. It's a safety issue to cross Brookville at Bradley. And in addition, I think it really would be wonderful to try in the long term to get some sort of sidewalk on the other side of Brookville Road between Bradley and Quincy. There's just one block where there's kind of a narrow sidewalk. People have to go into the road to avoid each other, whether they have dogs, strollers, bikes, all sorts of things. And it's just really not safe, particularly because the traffic is going so quickly. So if we're going to not get the crosswalks and the stop signs, at least, I don't know, in the long term, if we could just try to think about that as an idea of maybe.
I think we have even less jurisdiction on that side of the road, but I know exactly what you're talking about. And to me, it is bizarre that the sidewalk does not continue there. But the more if there's an additional sidewalk there, this will be a 1-lane road eventually by the time we're done with sidewalks. But I understand that, and the crosswalk and stop sign is something we could definitely discuss, and we'll take that under advisement. Susan, anything else?
Yeah, the walkability. I think that the village used to be connected by shortcuts that were off Brookville Road, and that became especially important during the pandemic when people were trying to avoid being right beside each other. But even as a public safety issue now, walking on Brookville Road with kids in strollers, with people, just pedestrians with bikes, etc., and cars zipping by, if there were any way to gain easements or rights of way between properties that were on between Quincy and Bradley, there used to be a shortcut between Raymond and the street that goes up towards Chevy Chase Park, where we do have a cut through now. It might be nice to finalize that if there is agreement among property owners. And then finally, between Turner and Taylor, there used to be a cut through. And all of these were fabulous ways that were safer ways for kids to traverse, and adults, the village. And it enhances our property values. It enhances our safety as pedestrians. And I know we do have some extra funds, and it was just, I think it was also mentioned in the walkability study. It was one of the recommendations to see if there could be any kinds of cut throughs or easements that could be gained. And so I just wanted to, again, put that out there as an idea. I think that could be very valuable for all of us if we could formalize some of those arrangements, and at the very least not lose the current cut through that we have between Raymond and going up toward the park that connects these parts of the village.
That's Brennan Lane right there.
Brennan. Okay.
Okay.
And there was one other thing I was going to mention. This was just about the election, some of the election issues that we've had. There was a statement sent out about the candidate forum, and based on the meetings that I recall going to, both at the election committee and at the council meeting where the election plan was very specifically discussed, I recalled things about that the forum would not be just moderated at the discretion of the people on the committee, but they would try to be impartial, or I thought wording to that effect was in the original plan that Paul Weller, as the chair, had put forth, and the next plan said that they would be only at their own discretion. Then I thought it was changed back during the committee meeting when people discussed it, and yet when we got a notice about the election forum, they said something about, we're going to moderate this solely at our own discretion. So I was a little surprised by that, because I thought that all the work you all put into it at the council level, you had said, yeah, it makes sense to have this moderated in an impartial manner to the extent possible. So that was one thing that was a little bit surprising when I saw the announcement about the forum. The other thing was that there was a very specific discussion about live questions at the forum. I know that Arthur had mentioned that he wanted to have live questions at the forum. Other people had echoed that. And I thought that that was put into the plan on some level. But when we got a notice recently about the forum, I don't recall any mention of the possibility or the option of questions being taken at the forum itself. And so I felt like, just in terms of the spirit of what was passed, I didn't understand that. And so I just wanted to mention that to the council. I know that the election committee manages the elections independently, but my understanding is they manage the election according to the plan that the council ends up passing. So I thought that those elements were in the plan. And if that was anyone else's understanding too, it might just be useful for Jeff and Arthur to revisit that as you all, as the liaisons or whoever. That was just something that was a question.
Helpful, Susan. Thank you very much. We're going to end with Marty.
Hi, everybody. And again, thank you for a very productive meeting, especially the discussions of the actual work that we need to be focused on. And thank you so much for moving to that. I just can't commend you enough for Michael focusing on this and council as well. From the sidewalks to the flooding, there's so many things to talk about. I would really like to suggest two things here. One is that we have a community forum to talk about sort of safety, structural, infrastructure issues, because you can see it's taken up some time in the meeting tonight. So let's not burden the next council meeting with it, but have a separate forum where people can talk about these very pragmatic issues, from parking to lighting to flooding. On this, the second issue I would like to say, I'm trying to wrap up quick here, is that I think it would be really helpful if Michael, I'm sure, Michael, you're a very organized guy, which I just love. You've probably got some kind of task manager system where you're going to be, and already are, tracking where each of these projects, is the status as they go and have updates. And I'm sure you have that already. I think it would be immensely helpful to communicate that to the village by having a page on the website that's a task manager page where you can say, here's the status of Brookville Road, here's the status on the Taylor Street flooding, here's the status on this and that. I just think, I'm sure you've got that. Let's make it public. I mean, communication matters, and openness and transparency. And we could save a lot of time, I think, at council meetings if we had two things in place. One is the task management page up on a website so people could look it up. And the second would be an open community forum where people can talk about infrastructure issues, because there's a lot of concern, and there's been delays in even getting to this. And I'm so thrilled we're getting to it now. And I commend you all for that. I will mention, by the way, that there's an old creek under Taylor Street that was here until the 1940s. It's not just stormwater runoff. There's actually a creek under there. And this is, yeah, it's in a culvert that's breaking down. So anyway, just thank you very much for focusing on the real work, the infrastructure work, and let's make sure that residents feel heard and get involved, because I think the council really needs to respond to the residents, and I commend you for doing so tonight. I really am impressed by this meeting tonight. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Marty. Elizabeth, if you have a quick comment, we're headed toward the end here, hopefully. Elizabeth?
You're still on mute if you're speaking, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, can you take it off of mute? With the three dots at the top right of your window?
Right.
There it is.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment on Quincy and Oxford with respect to the water. We have enough water to make an aquarium here on this street. And I'm dead serious. We have not only flooding, but water everywhere. And, unless we want to build a second Baltimore Aquarium, I suggest we do something about it and not suck on our thumbs. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Appreciate that.
The only response to it as is, as we talked about the budget is just ensuring that we've got the resources and you have the flexibility to, really tackle these things. So that's.
Yeah.
We can.
Okay. The council may entertain a motion in open session to enter into a closed session in accordance with section 3-305B of the Open Meetings Act, Maryland Code General Provisions Article. Would someone like to move to go into closed session?
I so move.
We have a
We
second.
just need to add the topics
Uh,
pursuant to subparagraph 7 to obtain legal advice on a legal matter regarding maintaining decorum and civility during meetings, and also to get legal advice with respect to a Public Information Act request. And I think I also heard pursuant to subparagraph 1 to discuss a personnel matter regarding specific individuals.
So be it.
So, all of that.
All in favor, so we had a Jeff move,
I
we had a
move.
second,
A second.
second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Ron stays on. I don't know how he does that, but
Thank you all.
appreciate everyone
Side with
being
me.
on. Thank you very much.